What's up, everyone? This is the Nuts and Bolts Podcast, and I'm your host, the One James, here with our amazing co-host, Airball.
Hey, guys.
And Michael Kritz.
What I do?
And we're here to give you the nuts and bolts of the Standard and Pioneer formats each and every week. But first, let me talk to you about the sponsor of this podcast, CoolStuffInc.com. Using code James5, you can save 5% off of anything in the store, sealed products, singles, anything you could ever need in Magic the Gathering, and every other game for that matter. They have it. Go save yourself some hard-earned money and go to CoolStuffInc.com today. Let's go right ahead to the upkeep, because we have a little bit of a longer podcast episode today. The upkeep today is going to be a bear, otherwise known as Grizzly Bear. Grizzly Bears, plural, is a card that is just a 2/2 creature with no abilities, costing 2 mana. And that's what a bear is. Anytime that you hear someone talk about a bear, it's usually a 2 mana 2/2 that does nothing. That has no abilities or has no like relevant abilities. If something has a 2 mana 2/2 that just does nothing, even if it has an ability that's not relevant right now, I guess you could call it a bear. Let's go right ahead and go into the main phase. It's the Brothers War set review, brand new set coming out. I'm pumped. I'm excited. An artifact set. I have never been playing Magic personally in an artifact set. Have either of you?
No.
Oh God, no.
That was like way too long ago, right?
Yeah, I don't know when.
Yeah, I have no idea. Anyways, we have an artifact set here. It's the Brothers War. We're going to go from the mythics into the rares. We're going to talk about some cards. We're probably going to conjecture a little bit on what we think some cards will do for the format, shake things up a little bit, but it's going to be a long episode, so strap in, grab a cup of coffee or whatever you like drinking. I have a cup of coffee and a water in front of me. Let's get started. We have our first mythic, Mirel, Shield of Argive. It's a 4 mana 3/4 legendary creature, human soldier. During your turn, your opponents can't cast spells or activate abilities of artifacts, creatures, or enchantments. Whenever Mirel, Shield of Argive, attacks, create X1/1 colorless soldier artifact creature tokens, where X is the number of soldiers you control. My first reaction is like, are you kidding me? Like, really?
I am not.
You're not? You're not kidding me?
I'm not kidding you. It is exactly what you just read.
I mean, what do you think about this card? Like, I don't even know how I analyze this. It's just like broken. I mean, yeah, it's 4 mana, but like, I don't know. How do you evaluate this?
It kind of reminds me of Dramoka from the Double Masters set. Like, players can't cast spells on your turn, and it's got this like nice property where you play it, and the opponent has been holding up mana for removal, and they can't do anything anymore. It's kind of like got that Teferi 3 quality from past standards, so it's nice in that way. But it is kind of understated as a 3/4 for 4. So if it gets Doombladed the next turn, you still kind of feel bad.
I mean, what do you think, Michael?
Yeah, I think this is going to be really interesting, and I don't quite know how it's going to slot or where it's going to slot. I think, and these are just quick thoughts, right? So I think aggro is going to love this easily. Like, easily you can slot this into aggro. But where I think it gets really interesting is, do control players put this in the sideboard against other control players? Like, does it go in Esper midrange as like a sideboard card in a weird way? Because now you know you're not getting fudged with as like a Teferi 3 card, except it makes soldiers. If you're ahead, like, this will cement you being ahead, because then you can like make soldiers and make dudes and attack, and they can't do anything on your turn. So it's a quick thing. I haven't super analyzed it, but it's just where my brain goes.
Like, that is an interesting part of the card that I didn't think of. It's like kind of an Adeline, but like, it's like a worse Adeline, but also says your spells can't be countered. So it's like, wow. I didn't actually think about that part of it. I figured, you know, you're gonna have a Wandering Emperor in your hand, right? And you're gonna be like, all right, I'm gonna get him on this Wandering Emperor. We're gonna exile their Brutal Cathar when they attack with it. I'm gonna get my creature back. I'm gonna block their thing, and then we're gonna win the game. And then they go, all right, 4th land, Mirel, Shield of Argive, and you're like, oh, I guess I have to cast Wandering Emperor now.
It actually doesn't stop you from activating Planeswalker abilities, so that's one of the only things it doesn't turn off.
But
Well, that's true.
Yeah,
But you have to cast it like first,
Yes, that's right.
before you like really want to, and then your opponent sees that you have the Wandering Emperor now, and now they don't attack with the Brutal Cathar.
Right.
So it's just one of those Teferi 3 things where it's like, I don't know. Did we need another Teferi 3 effect? Like, did we?
Yeah, but they did this one in the right way, right? Remember, Teferi 3 turned off a bunch of stuff that I don't think play design intended for it to turn off. This is just during your turn. Opponents can still
Yeah.
do all their cool stuff on theirs. I think this is fine.
yeah.
That's true, but you have Teferi 3 that also like makes additional creatures. Like I'd be okay if it was like a 4 mana 4/4 or 3/4 that it is right now that just had the first ability, but it's got to make more soldiers too, and they're also artifacts, so it triggers all of your artifact energies. Oh my gosh, I don't know. It's one of the best cards in the set, I think. It's just really good. So there's a card that comes after this in line here, and you can see this if you're watching from YouTube. One with the Multiverse. It's an 8 mana enchantment at Mythic. You may look at the top card of your library anytime. You may play lands and cast spells from the top of your library. Once during each of your turns, you may cast a spell from your hand or the top of your library without paying its mana cost. My takeaway of this card is like, yeah, all that stuff sounds cool, but is it like the Magic Mirror random like 8 mana artifact that we'll never see play because you can't actually get to that point in the game where it's relevant?
I think this is going to be like some omniscience-like payoff in Modern or Pioneer, where you can have some sort of oops all spells deck and just go off, like a Goblin Charbelcher kind of thing. I think the card is really cool. I think 8 mana is way too much for this effect, especially when there's the enchantment hate that is available in this set that we haven't gotten to yet.
Yeah, but it's only once during your turn you can cast a spell without paying its mana cost. So it's like, you know, you can't just go off like you could with like a Bolt Citadel or something.
Yeah, that's true.
And then
I thought this was like a frenzy, but yeah.
Yeah, it's not. You can only cast one of those cards for free, right? Because it says you may cast a spell from your hand or the top of the without paying its mana cost. So it's just whatever you have in your hand plus the one thing on top of your library. So that's at least free. But I don't know how this is gonna work because I know it's a Power Stone set. But like if you're trying to play Power Stone stuff and then you play this card by the time you get to 8 mana, like what the top of your deck is like a Power Stone like enabler, and you're like, sick, I can play like these 2 like Dirtly cards in this Power Stone card that's in my top of my deck is what I see like most of the cases being. So I don't know if this card's gonna be good.
We already went off the last episode, okay, with me talking about the Power Stone stuff. You can't make fun of my Power Stone stuff now, okay? Anyway, maybe you can.
Watch me.
But anyways,
I was just gassing you up for content. I'm so sorry.
One with the Multiverse actually is like you can cast 2 spells per turn. Like, say you cast the first one off the top of your deck. Like, okay, in Magical Christmas Land, you cast one with the Multiverse somehow, and you untap with it. Never going to happen, by the way. There's infinite enchantment removal in Standard. Between like Destroy Evil, Tear Asunder, like. Even freaking Hopeful Initiate kills this thing. Like, when are you ever untapping with this? Anyway, in Magical Christmas Land, you untap with this, right? And then you get to cast 1 spell off the top of your library, and then like 1 spell from your hand. Like, is that worth it?
No, this card is none with the multiverse. Okay.
I see what you did there. You were waiting on that one. You were waiting to tell me. I mean, even Airball, the blue-white player himself, can't even get his mind around this card.
Oh, we don't cast things 8 mana at sorcery speed. We don't do that here.
Yeah, I mean, you get close to it, right? Shark Typhoon, you cast that.
Oh, when we're styling on you, for sure. Like when the game's already won.
Right. We're gonna move on because this card's probably just not gonna see play, right?
You can cast it in the trash. That's what you can do with it.
You're gonna wait. You can actually cast this in the trash. It's 8 mana. Like, it's a lot.
Yeah, just cast it into the trash. You're good.
You don't have to cast it. You just throw it. Anyway, Gix Yawgmoth the Praetor. It's a 3 mana 3/3, 1 in double black for a legendary creature, Phyrexian Praetor. So I heard. I'm gonna stutter 18 times while I say this, but I think that this is the first Praetor ever, like before Shieldred and like in the lore, before Shieldred and Jin-Gitaxias and all the other Praetors. This is the first one I heard from the lore. Am I right?
I think you're right. but
Oh yeah,
I'm
it
not a
is.
lore person.
It is because Gix was like the person who started doing like Yagma created Gix, I believe, first, and then it just popped off from there or something like that.
Okay.
I know Shieldred's flavor text says Gix failed, I won't, which means Gix came before Shieldred. That's all I've got for you.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much for that. Okay, what does this card actually do, guys? It's whenever a creature deals combat damage to one of your opponents, its controller may pay 1 life. If they do, they draw a card. You can pay 4 black, so 7 total mana. Discard X cards. Exile the top X cards of target opponent's library. You may play lands and cast spells from among cards exiled this way without paying their mana costs. There's a lot of without paying their mana costs with these mythics, aren't there? But this Gix card might actually be better. What is that partner commander that's like an Orzhov card that says this exact same text, right? Whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to one of your opponents, draw a card and pay a life. Tymna, yeah. This is like a mono black Tymna, right? Isn't this just broken?
I don't know yet, but it is a better one with the multiverse. Weirdly.
Interesting evaluation. All right, he's hired. All right. Anyone want to hire Michael for a card evaluation? No, but this card here, like say you cast a 1-drop. Say you're playing mono black aggro or something. Cast your 1-drop Evolve Sleeper. Cast your 2-drop whatever 2-drop it is, even if it's Jadar even better. You get a 1/1 and a 2/2 with it, or you cast your Tenacious Underdog. Okay, turn 3 you cast Gix. You attack with 2 of your creatures, or 3 if it's Jadar on turn 2, and then you draw 3 cards and lose 3 life. Like how? Tell me how this works, right or no? That's how this works, right?
No, I think whenever one of your opponents is controlled may pay 1. Whenever a creature deals combat damage, its control may pay 1 life. If they,
it's whenever any creature deals combat damage, you can pay a life and draw a card.
Yeah, so it's for each thing that hits. Yep.
Wow.
I think you're right.
Okay, so when is this ever like not good? Like even if it works even on itself, so you can cast this on an open board and just start attacking and drawing cards.
And the May part's really powerful too. It's not a have to.
Right. If so you can't just like deck out with it or something.
Or die from paying the life.
Paying the life, yeah. And then the 4 and triple black, you would think is not relevant to discard X cards, but if you're discarding X cards, which means you're already drawing a lot of cards with Gix anyway, and then you can exile your opponent's top cards to the library and cast all of them without paying their mana cost. Not to mention that I'm going to bring Power Stones into the mix again, that you can easily pay this if you're playing Power Stone. If you're playing any type of Power Stone synergy at all. Like turn 5 or 6, you can definitely... Turn 4, 5, or 6, you can definitely pay this cost, right?
Yeah.
Like it's not actually true. It's not like a really difficult cost, even though it does say 7 mana on it.
Yeah, I think you're around thinking in the right lines. Yeah.
I mean, anything else on this airball?
Yeah, I just want to point out that I think sometimes people overvalue effects like this. Because they think of it as like, I discard 3, draw 3, but you don't draw 3. You draw 3 from the top of your opponent's library, and their cards on average are going to be worse for you than your own. Otherwise, you'd be playing them in your deck. So I think it's a little worse than it seems. I think it's also just still quite good. It's a great late game sync, and the combat damage ability is very relevant early on.
There's also another thing. If you're drawing so many cards with this card already, and you have like a bunch of lands in your hand, or 1 or 2 drops that you don't need anymore, those cards can be pseudo upgraded to very powerful cards off your opponent's deck that would otherwise not be meaningful to you at all. But also, I noticed just now that this is not a tap effect, so you can just do this. If you're like way late in the game and you have like 12 mana or whatever, you can just like play this and then pay the cost right away.
Oh, one more observation. In this set in particular, discard is a good outlet to have because of all the legendaries. So there's a lot of ways to cycle away legendary cards that you wouldn't be able to play that would just be stuck in your hand for no value.
And I also think if you for some reason you can untap with both into turn 5 with both Gix and Shieldred in your battlefield, like you just win the game. I'm pretty sure it just says you win the game. Like, yeah, I don't know how your opponent recovers from both Gix and Shieldred just like waylaying all the value.
Yeah, and even in mono black aggro or mono black mid range in standard, there is a notable drop off of power level on turn 3. There's Graveyard Trespasser and Liliana of the Veil, and like that's it. And I think mono black has been missing like that turn 3 card. Right now they're playing like Soul Transfer and I've seen even Shakedown heavy in some mono black mid range decks, and this is way better than those.
Oh, yeah.
All right, moving on to the next one, Draconic Destiny. 1 and double red enchantment aura. I don't think I've ever seen a card like this before. Like a mono red aura at Mythic Rare. I mean, it must be good, right? Enchant creature. Enchant creature gets +1/+1 and has flying, haste, and pay 1 generic mana. This creature gets +1/+0 till end of turn. It's a dragon in addition to its other types. When enchanted creature dies, return Draconic Destiny to its owner's hand. So this is like a pretty expensive ranker, but gives every creature that it's on flying, haste, and fire breathing, and it's also a dragon.
Yeah.
So like that's real. I feel like they're like pushing the power level of an aura and being like, okay, well, what kind of expensive aura would be too broken? There's already been a card like this that I can think of that's like kind of like this. Like this returns to your hand, but there's also the flashback card, the 3 mana Boros flashback card that gives 2 +1/+1 counters, vigilance, haste, lifelink, and indestructible. I forgot what that card's called off the top of my head.
Angel Fire Ignition.
Angel Fire Ignition, yes. It gives me like Angel Fire Ignition vibes. It has the same amount of mana. You can use it twice. Draconic Destiny, you're probably only getting it to use it like once or twice or 3 times throughout the game, because not only does it go to your hand, but then you have to cast it again on something else. But it is reusable. It is a very powerful effect. I'm curious to see how it will be used though, because it's 3 mana and you also have to pay additional mana to fire breathe it.
Yeah. I also think it's similar to that thing that we did in I forget what format, historic possibly, where you had Reggie and then you put that like 2 or 3 mana black enchantment on Reggie, so it flew and just like flying 7 damage thing going towards you, or it like became 8 or 9, something ridiculous. But Draconic Destiny kind of gives me the same flavors of that, and but yeah, so I think it's interesting. I know we don't talk much about limited, but like if I ever see this card and my opponent has it in limited, I just like probably auto concede and be like, yeah, good games, dude.
Do you think that's why they made it mythic? Do you think that's why they made it a mythic? Because of it would be way too broken for limited? Like, how are you supposed to kill? Like, you cast this on a card, and if you don't have instant speed removal like right away, and we'll talk about some more instant speed removal cards as we go, but if you don't have it right away, you're like pretty dead, right?
Yeah.
All right.
I would imagine.
So I guess it's mythic for limited. Maybe it could be like a rare or something if it wasn't constructed, but curious to see what this card does. Anyway, Awaken the Woods. This card is super interesting because I've never seen a card quite like this before. X and double green for a sorcery at Mythic. Create X 1/1 green forest dryad land creature tokens. They are affected by summon sickness. Notably, don't have haste. But if you're watching this from YouTube and you see Michael Crit's mouth, I think that just jaw's like on the ground.
I didn't read that they were lands.
Yes, they're lands. So it's a ramp spell, but it also is 1/1s.
No, not like this. I hate
like this.
I don't like it. I don't like it. If it sees play, I don't like it. If it doesn't, I don't care.
I mean, what do you think, Airball? First glance.
My first broken thoughts were like Commander landfall bullshit.
Oh, geez, it counts as landfall, doesn't it?
Oh,
yeah.
God.
Oh.
What,
like so there's
retreat?
That. Yeah. Phylath, all that bullshit. But I'm trying to do some math to evaluate whether it's like good in standard. So like for every X you pay in addition to 2, you get a land that is vulnerable to creature removal. So like you probably want to cast this, I'm guessing whatever deck wants to cast it on turn 3 or 4, because after a certain point, ramping more than that doesn't really help. So you're paying 4 mana, put 2 lands into play probably, which is like that can't do anything. So that's like a circuitous route. I think that's normal for this kind of effect.
Right, but circuitous routes are common. Like this thing being a mythic, I think maybe have like other implications that we aren't thinking of. Like it's like landfall. They are forests. They help cast. They help pay for a lot of mana sinks that are in this set so far because you're supposed to want to be like utilizing power stones. Also, the later and later the game goes, like the better and better Awaken the Woods gets, and you can't really say that with a lot of ramp spells. Like you have 7 mana, and like now you have 5 1/1s with this card, right? So it gives me a little bit of like I don't even know what other card does. It's like March of the Multitudes type card.
Yeah, but that was an instant.
Yeah, for sure.
I think something to kind of reevaluate this card is virtual. You have virtual lands and virtual like card advantage via creatures as well. So like if you need a board stall, this does the board stall while moving you ahead in mana. And if that's like something that you want to do, I don't know if it's like a sideboard card or something like that. That's pretty huge implications, I think. So because you have blockers, which can also be tap for land, or it's like multifunctional. So I don't know how to really evaluate this card, but it does make me think they're virtual lands and virtual creatures. And it's kind of a big value play at like turn 4, depending on what your opponent is doing. So I don't know.
They also can't be affected by cards that say like exile target non-land permanent, like bounce target non-land permanent. You know, there's a lot of cards that say that. Like Borrowed Time is playing standard right now, and in like Green-White enchantments, there's like a lot of cards that say non-land permanent. Like there's the 6 mana white flash enchantment that had the domain one. I can't remember the names off the top of my head.
Leyline Binding.
The Leyline Binding that says that. Not that you would actually want to remove a random 1/1, but the fact that this pseudo ramp spell, quote unquote, gets better and better as the game goes on might make it worth being mythic, but we'll see how it goes. I can see the mana being utilized in this set for sure. Yep. Moving on to another mythic here, we're going back to white. In the Trenches. This is a very interesting card. It's a 1 white enchantment. Creatures you control get +1/+1. So it's a anthem. We've already talked about that jargon, MTG jargon, in a previous episode. So if you don't know what an anthem means, go back and listen to it. You can pay 5 and a white. Exile target non-land permanent you don't control until In the Trenches leaves the battlefield. Activate only as a sorcery and only once. It'll be way more interesting if you could just keep doing this with how much mana you had, even though it's 6 mana, that you can just like do it every turn, but that'll be like way too broken, right?
Yeah, and I think it's just like one of those weird things that could slot into the Esper decks, but I don't know what you're gonna. I can't evaluate this card. I just don't.
I think it has a spot in like really low to the ground mono white aggro, and maybe like the white blue soldiers deck that seems to be a thing in this set. Something that you would want the buff on the creatures, and also just is a removal spell later on in the game.
Yeah, I think it's good in mirrors too. Like whichever mirror you're using it, whether it's the white aggro mirror or like the control mirror, like it could be decent. I think it's kind of like a mirror breaker card if I think about it, like how it's best utilized. But yeah, that's what I got.
I don't think I've ever seen an exile clause that you can just use whenever on an anthem. Like, how do you evaluate this, Airball?
Really weird.
I know, that's what I'm thinking.
It's cool that we see this once per game kind of effect for a card, right? Like usually it's activate only once per turn or whatever, but this time it's like once per game, which is interesting.
Or once per like instance of the card, right?
Yeah, sorcery speed hurts this a lot. 6 mana, exile something at sorcery speed is just asking to get blown out a lot of the time, but it is just a strictly better anthem. So if your anthem was good, this will be better.
Wait, it's only once through the whole game
with this one instance of the card. Yeah,
I have never read something like that. That is super interesting. Okay.
Yeah, there's lands that were printed, I think, in the last set of the set before that they're like a tap land, but you can pay like 4 mana and tap it and draw a card, but you can only do it once.
Those were the gates in Alchemy, so those aren't real cards. Like this is the first paper
those
magic
were Alchemy.
card.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so maybe they liked that idea and wanted to like use Alchemy as a little tester, and then actually made it in this card.
Stop talking about fictional cards, Gabe.
No, I'm talking about a real card. It's called In the Trenches. You know, in the Brothers War.
All right. Well, more to real cards, like perhaps Teferi.
All right.
Yes, please.
Oh no. Can we just skip this for Airball's sake? I just don't want to see him
No.
smile anymore.
No, we get to let him have his wins. Okay,
We get
let
to
him have his wins.
okay. Airball, you want this win real quick? All right. How about you go over it?
I very much.
All right. I'll let you go
All
over it.
right. It doesn't have any plus abilities. For 0 loyalty, you get to draw a card. For -2 loyalty, you create a 2/2 blue spirit creature token with vigilance, and whenever you draw a card, put a +1/+1 counter on that creature. And then finally, the pièce de résistance, the -12, the ultimate. Target opponent chooses a permanent they control and returns it to its owner's hand. Then they shuffle each non-land permanent they control into its owner's library. That ultimate is really cool, and I think it's going to be a lot easier to achieve that ultimate than it is to ultimate something like Teferi Hero of Dominaria. Because you need to draw 8 cards, whereas Teferi Hero of Dominaria, you need to plus it 4 times over 4 turns. This is a pretty powerful one-sided board wipe effect, and it rewards you for doing things that any deck that wants to run a 5-mana blue planeswalker is already trying to do. Draw a bunch of cards, defend itself, stall, and then wipe the board.
Yeah. And for the record, I believe our podcast was kind of right about nailing this being the planeswalker like Teferi through the Morrow, like what do you call this? When he gave like the
teasers last week.
The teasers, yeah, we kind of nailed like it has to be Teferi, it has to be drawing cards. So yeah. Pretty cool.
That was super cool. This static text, whenever you draw a card, put a loyalty counter on Teferi, is absolutely busted. Can you imagine having like Silver Scrutiny in your hand and your opponent like, yeah, I could attack this planeswalker down, and they attack it with like a Graveyard Trespasser and like another freaking random 3 power card. You're like, yeah, I'm killing it. And then you're like, with 4 damage, I'll draw 3 cards. And then Teferi stays alive, and they've just like, and Teferi's just alive, and you drew 3 cards, and you're like, I drew my board wipe. Sick board, opponent. Like,
forget that. Imagine making the 2/2 and drawing at instant speed to block that Graveyard Trespasser.
That too.
Like,
that too. This card gains loyalty by you drawing your card in your draw step. Like, what?
Yeah, the card is really wild now that I'm thinking about it. Because like the -2, it's also whenever you draw a card, not like when you do the plusing. Like it's anytime you draw a card. So that's it could really get pretty buff. And then yeah, let's just say like also like they have an instant speed like damage to a planeswalker. That's a huge tempo swing of like I'm gonna draw cards and then your thing fizzles. Like you just say, you know, you draw 2 and they use the card on Teferi, that's like a 3 card thing in your favor. Like that's wild.
Yeah, they can even go like, you know, whatever card that kills planeswalkers, like Cathartic Pyre or something, deal 3 damage to the planeswalker, and then you're like, I'll draw a card in response. And now that was like, they just threw away a card for like no reason. But I think the most powerful card about this, and you might not even get that situation I just said like off a lot. I think what's going to happen more often, this is like a +2. It's not a 0, it's a +2. Like you draw for turn and then you draw a card, and then it gets 2 more loyalty counters every time you like go to your next turn. But what you do here is you play this, you -2, okay, and then like considering you're not playing the 2/2 into just a board where you have to chump block with it, the 2/2 lives, or you protect the 2/2, whatever you have to do. The next turn you draw a card, it becomes a 3/3. And then you 0 this and draw a card, it becomes a 4/4. Or what you can also do is you draw your card for turn, it becomes a 3/3, and you get another loyalty counter on Teferi, and then Teferi goes to 3 loyalty, and then you -2 again. And now you have a 3/3 and a 2/2 and a 1 loyalty Teferi that your opponent's just never dealing with. And then every single turn, those 2/2s are getting bigger and bigger just by you drawing a card for your turn, and not to mention you're also drawing cards off Teferi. I don't know. I feel like this like could be just oppressive. I don't know.
Yeah, I think that this card will be better the better counter spells are in the format.
Yeah.
Because counter spells, traditionally, the way you mitigate opponents playing around them, you have to hold that mana. If the opponent doesn't play into them, is you play your card draw spells. You don't really want to be doing that on your turn. You want to be doing that on your opponent's turn. So you need something else to do with your mana other than draw cards, or they'll just sort of kill you. Counter spells right now are not very good. Other than something small like Disdainful Stroke. Like you're not playing Cancel, you're not playing Sinister Sabotage, you're not playing a 3-mana counter spells.
Like one right now is like Urtai Scorn and like Wash Away that you could play.
Right. and you have to play black for that instead of white, which I think is a concession. I'm not sure that this card will be good in standard. I'm not even sure it will be good in Pioneer, but I think it will be when the format is ripe. This card will come in and it'll do some damage.
I mean, I think this card will just go, like, this card will swing for the fences as soon as it gets printed. Like, I know you're probably listening to this podcast like maybe a week before the set comes out, and like, I don't know. I think I'm just going for like 3 of these immediately in like whatever control deck I'm building. Like, can you imagine going like turn 4 Wandering Emperor into like turn 5 Teferi Temporal Pilgrim? Like, how devastating is that for your opponent? Like,
yeah, Shieldred does make this card very, very sad.
Shieldred does make this card sad, but the 2/2 blue spirit creature tokens with vigilance, by the way, we didn't even mention that yet. I mean, I know you mentioned it when you're going over the card, but they also have vigilance. Like, why? Anyway, these can also just get just as big to block Shieldred after like what, 3 turns anyway, 2 turns. So who knows? Anyway, I think the card's like super powerful.
Yeah.
Moving on to Hostile Negotiations. It's a 4-mana instant. And the bar's pretty high on 4-mana instants that aren't like a sweeper, right? But just wait till you hear this card. Exile the top 3 cards of your library in a face-down pile. Then exile the top 3 cards of your library in another face-down pile. Look at the cards in each pile. Then turn a pile of your choice face up. Put that pile into your hand, and the other into your graveyard. You lose 3 life.
I think you left out the part where the opponent chooses which pile you put into your hand.
Did I miss a line? There's so many lines on this card.
It's the most important line on the card.
Yes.
Look at the cards in each pile, then turn a pile of your choice face up. An opponent chooses one of those piles. Put that pile into your hand and the other into your graveyard. You lose 3 life. So, what is this, like Factor Fiction?
Like, Factor Fiction.
Like you turn you exile the top 3, then you exile another 3. It kind of reminds me of like what's that card, Atris?
Mm-hmm.
It kind of reminds me of that, but it's like worded a little bit different than Atris.
Mm-hmm.
But you can still do like things with this card to out mind game your opponent, which I like. I kind of like cards like this, and it's also just a 4-mana draw 3 when you think about it.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah, this card's like sick, but like at the same time too, like I forget, there's like articles or like some sort of clips or whatever that you could probably find on the internet, but there's a way to kind of deal with this to make like a pretty good choice each time, and I don't remember the heuristics on it, but there's a way to like go back to like Factor Fiction or the other card y'all mentioned before, the creature that like Atris. You can figure out Atris. You can figure out a way to essentially make sure that you don't go with like the worst pick. But yeah, it's interesting. I think it's a good card.
I love the card design on this. I loved the mind game aspects of like Factor Fiction and Atris, but the worst part of those cards was people tanking, making their piles. This one has the same like mind game element, but the piles are pre-made for you. You don't have any control over that, barring like a brainstorm or something. And so you get all the fun much faster, and you still get to draw 3 at a minimum. This is a great card. It's my favorite card of the set.
Yeah, I think it's really good too, and I think this card might contribute to Blue-Eye Control going to Esper, or like Blue-Eye Control going to Dimir Control, if like there's more black cards, because we're going to go over some black cards that are still in the bunch of cards in here that are really freaking good. So who knows? This one card says 4-mana instant speed, draw 3. Like right now, there's none of those in standard. There's none of those like period a lot of the time, like ever. So just having a card like this is just that much card advantage for one card is just insane. I mean, even if you like, turn a pile that you think your opponent would pick face up and they pick the other pile and it's like 2 lands and a bad spell, you still paid 4 mana for 3 cards.
Yeah, it's like better than Treasure Cruise in some way.
Excuse me? Hey, I know you didn't just say that. Oh my god.
Like, I'm saying in some ways. I'm not saying in every case. I'm saying like some ways you're paying 4 and it's an instant and you're getting to draw 3 cards. Like, people a lot of times in Magic, like Magic breaks sometimes when you just get to straight up draw 3 cards, no matter sometimes what the mana value of the card is. And like, this is it's 4 mana every time, so you know that you're going to be it's like on curve, unlike Treasure Cruise, where it's like maybe I'll get there, maybe I won't, maybe the leg's on my graveyard, XYZ. It's like
Right.
no, you have 4 mana, you can just draw 3 cards straight up, and you get to hold it up. Like it's a wild effect. Like the other only effect that we had like this recently was what's that card's name that had from Kaldheim, the one that you can like what was that thing where you could like kind of tuck it away in exile and they couldn't see what was happening?
I forgot, what's the mechanic of that again?
Yeah, it was Foretell was the mechanic,
Foretell.
but I forgot that blue card because like a special thing happened when you could do it. Was it
like Behold the Multiverse or?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Like, and that card was super powerful, and it wasn't. I don't even think you got to draw 3 cards off of it. So,
no,
like,
it was cry 2, draw 2,
or something like that. But anyway, card might just have huge implications. So that's all my point is.
Yeah, I mean, if I'm playing a control deck and or like whatever deck, and I pass with 4 mana up, and I'm playing white mana, my opponent doesn't attack because I think I have Wandering Emperor, and then I step play this and I draw 3. I feel like the game's already over. I don't know. Like I win whenever you resolve this on a Anyway, next one is called Over the Top. I mean, I guess Hostile Negotiations is a pretty over the top card itself, but I guess it's a good segue transition into this card.
Well
Over
done.
the Top is a 7 mana. Oh, thank you. 7 mana sorcery for double red. 5 in double red. Okay, I need to wrap my mind around a 7 mana sorcery. Each player reveals a number of cards from the top of their library equal to the number of non-land permanents they control. Puts all permanent cards they revealed this way onto the battlefield and puts the rest into their graveyard.
I don't know.
What? This is some different version of chaos. Right? Isn't this just like you play this and then the commander pod goes crazy? Or is that like the only situation I can see this card being played?
Maybe in like older formats, like modern or something. Because it's like other. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. Like it's like one of those things where it's just like you have to make sure that your deck has bigger hits than your opponent's.
So you just fight rigging this thing out?
I have no idea.
What if you just like fight rigging this thing out and have a bunch of random treasures and Power Stone tokens lying around, and your opponent doesn't, and you get a bunch of cards and your opponent doesn't?
That's what I'm saying. There's a card in like modern that like you get to like for every permanent on the battlefield, you kind of just like you like sack or you put those into your deck, and then you draw like another 7 or something. It's like a bunch of ETB effects that make other tokens and like and just wildness. So there's a bunch of game objects. It's like a game object. Sorry, it's a game object mechanic. Like it does well when your deck can just have a bunch of ETBs and game objects.
Isn't that just like, is it called like Warp World or something like that?
I don't remember what it is off the top of my head.
What do you think about this card, Airball?
It's kind of got this interesting challenge to it, right? Like you want to set up for it by having a bunch of non-land permanents in play, which probably means having a bunch of cheap crap. But that means that most of your hits off of it are also going to be cheap crap. So it's got like a weird deck construction paradigm, and the fact that it can benefit your opponent way more than it benefits you, probably 25% of the time, makes it worse, like a lot worse.
I think this is like
a great.
Go ahead.
I think it's like a great fun commander card. I don't see it having applications in standard. I think like. I think 7's too much, and I think it's too hard to build around.
Yeah, do you think this pushes like, red-based group hug decks over the top?
I don't even think so. Like I still think the threshold that we're trying to think of what you're trying to meet is just game objects. Your deck has to make a whole bunch of blood tokens, Power Stone tokens, clue tokens, like on top of the cardboards already slamming onto the table. Like that's your objective, and your opponent doesn't have this virtual card advantage. So like even in a commander deck, if we're talking about commander stuff, it's like, well, you just need to make sure all your stuff makes more stuff. And that's the only way you capitalize on this.
You're going to play this because you just want everyone to have a chaotic time. You're not playing this card because you think it's good or anything. You just want to like mess up the whole board and just be chaotic.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Let me make this card my commander, please.
Yeah, exactly. And I said, do you think it pushes it over the top as a joke because this card's gone over the top? But you guys just went way over your head. Anyway,
I went over our heads. Oh.
Oh God! It went over the top of your heads.
All right, I think
Wow.
we're over this card.
Okay. Okay. Well, I don't know. All right. Anyway, next up is a better card. I promise. It's Titania, Voice of Gaia. 1 and double green for a flip card. It's a 3/4 legendary creature elemental with reach. Whenever one or more land cards are put into your graveyard from anywhere, you gain 2 life. At the beginning of your upkeep, if there are 4 or more land cards in your graveyard and you both own and control Titania, Voice of Gaia, and a land named Argoth, Sanctum of Nature, which we'll go over later on in the podcast, exile them, then meld them into Titania, Gaia Incarnate. Titania Gaia Incarnate says it's a legendary creature elemental avatar with XX as its power and toughness. It has vigilance, reach, trample, and haste. So this thing's coming at you. Titania, Gaia Incarnate's power and toughness are each equal to the number of lands you control, which is, spoiler alert, a lot. When Titania enters the battlefield, return all land cards from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. Oh, it's even more than I thought. You can also pay 3 and a green. Put 4 +1/+1 counters on target land you control. It becomes a 0/0 elemental creature with haste. It's still a land, so it's kind of like a Nissa Who Shakes the World effect.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's a lot to go over. I ran out of breath already talking about it, but what do you think? Titania, Voice of Gaia. Are we flipping this? Like, are we just using this for a 3/4 reacher for 3? It seems already pretty good. Like, it gains a lot of life. What do you think?
I don't think it's a card. Quick like assessment. I don't think it's a good card. I don't know what you're really going to be doing here. And I don't know if you're ever going to get to Titania, Gaia Incarnate easily. So I'm not too hot about this card.
You don't think you can get to this easily?
Not really. No.
I mean, there's a lot of like the gain life fetch lands in standard right now, and you can play like a whole bunch of cards that fuel the graveyard with lands. Like, there's also like cards that pitch lands, Fable the Mirror Breaker pitching lands. Like, it's pretty easy to get 4 lands in the graveyard. The only problem I think I have with this card and getting it off is that it's the beginning of the upkeep trigger. So it's like you have 4 lands in your graveyard and you have a Gaia or a Titania, Voice of Gaia on the battlefield, and your opponent has to just like stop everything. Okay, we have to kill Titania or it's gonna like evolve into Gaia Incarnate.
Yeah. And you have to have the Argoth land too. So I don't know. It just seems difficult to pull off, perhaps. That's my assessment.
I think it's pretty cool with Soul of Windgrace.
Oh yeah.
You're already motivated to put lands in the battlefield there. You can use Soul of Windgrace's ability to put lands in the battlefield. We already saw early in the standard that getting lands into the battlefield isn't that difficult when you have the Streets of New Capenna, what are they called? Evolving Wild Effect lands.
Yeah, the gain life fetch lands.
Exactly. And Fable of the Mirror Breaker obviously is great to discard cards. There's a good number of loot effects in the format. I think that I don't think you're going to be flipping it a lot, but I do think that it's going to be such a must-kill threat that it might make your Soul of Windgrace or like other mid-range game plan live. I think it's cool.
And if you're playing a Jund mid-range deck, you have to go super hard into green to play Titania, though. It's like 1 and double green, which I guess if you're playing the fetch lands, there's the Naya fetch land, and there's the Jund fetch lands, and they're both green. So there's like 8 right there that can fetch for green, which isn't that hard to do. Plus, it's just a 3 mana 3/4 reach, so it's like really good stats for 3 mana too.
Yep, and you can trigger its ability immediately with those fetch lands too. You're basically guaranteed to gain 2 life off of it if you can sacrifice one of those right away.
Yeah, and there's also a card in the set, I believe, that makes maybe it's just a commander card, the one that makes all of your lands basic in your deck.
I saw that one. Yeah.
So like maybe you can search for the land that you need with this, with like the fetch basic land. Maybe I'm not sure because I think it's a forest. But anyway, regardless of that, it might not come up as often. But Titania, Gaia Incarnate. Let's just talk about that for a little bit. Like, what happens when Voice of Gaia flips? Right? It's if you're playing that type of deck where you have a bunch of fetch lands and they're all going to your graveyard, and maybe you play some mill strategies with like Teachings of the Kirin or something to mill your lands and bringing them back with Soul of Windgrace, and you just have a lot of lands in your graveyard at this point because that's what your deck does because you're playing Titania. And then this card is an XX when it comes on the battlefield. Maybe it's like a 5/5 or a 6/6, but then it ETBs and it brings all of your lands back again from your graveyard to trigger all over again. And now it's just like a 10/10 or like a 9/9 or whatever. And it has Vigilance, Reach, Trample, and Haste. So like if this doesn't say like win the game on the spot, like I don't know what does. It has Vigilance, so it can't even get Wandering Emperor. Like, I mean, what happens when Gaia Incarnate comes down? Like that's what's gonna make Titania Voice of Gaia, the 3-drop, just such a must answer threat, especially when the land's on the battlefield.
Yeah, I can see.
I can even see mono green playing this. Like I can see a lot of different decks like trying this out. Who knows whether someone's ever going to get Titania Gaia Incarnate off, but I think it's an interesting card nonetheless.
Yes.
We're going to go over the next one. It's called Siege Veteran. It's a 2 and a white for a 2/2 human soldier. Soldiers are going to be a big thing in this set. At the beginning of combat on your turn, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. Whenever another non-token soldier you control dies, create a 1/1 colorless soldier artifact creature token. So it does contribute to artifact landfall, not landfall for artifacts, but artifact ETB synergies. They are colorless soldier artifacts creature tokens, so it's another soldier. So a lot of soldier buffs will buff those as well. And also it's like a Luminarch Aspirant for 3. Luminarch Aspirant's a 2-mana 1/1, which gets under counterspell, so I understand how that's much better than this. But it's a 3-mana 2/2 that puts +1/+1 counters on things, and it's also a soldier itself. So how do you evaluate this card? I'll start with you, Airball.
Yeah, I had the same first thought that you and probably everyone else looking at it did, which was that it's time walked Luminarch Aspirant, right? Like it's 3 mana instead of 2, and the +1/+1 counter is like on top of it immediately for that turn 2 play. So it's worse than Luminarch Aspirant quite clearly without that second line of text. And I was waiting until the full spoiler came out to decide how much soldier support there was. I think this is probably better in mono white than Luminarch Aspirant was, because I think in order to play mono white, you need to lean heavily into the soldier archetype anyway, and I think the support for it is pretty good. I think this card is great.
Yeah, notably that Thalia, Guardian of Thraben, is a soldier. There's a lot of cards that are like already soldiers that mono white already plays. What do you think, Michael?
I think everything that needs to be said about this card has been said between you two, and I just agree. It's good in mono white. I don't think there's much debating that. Like, it's just going to be good in mono white. You put it in your mono white deck that runs soldiers, and you have a good thing going on.
Also protects against sweepers, right? There's not many things in mono white. Usually things in mono white or like a white card like this will say like give something indestructible. But this one actually gives you 1/1 bodies after you get swept, which is super freaking relevant. Anax. Yeah, it's like Anax in that way. It's super relevant. It does say non-token soldiers, so if you make soldiers with this already and it gets swept, the token soldiers will die and not create 1/1s. But for every non-token soldier you control that dies, which will be your whole board because you're playing soldiers, it will definitely make it harder to play cards like Depopulate or Drag to the Bottom against this card. You're gonna want to have to remove this first and then Drag to the Bottom, which just adds another layer of annoyance to an already annoying deck, right?
Yeah.
All right, our next card, Skystrike Officer, 2 and a blue for a human soldier. It's a rare again. It's a 2/3 flyer. When Skystrike Officer attacks, create a 1/1 colorless soldier artifact creature token. Tap 3 untapped soldiers you control, draw a card. I saw on Twitter someone saying this breaks soldiers. But I mean, it's not even a but. It's I think this card's really good. A 3-mana 2/3 flyer is not nothing. It's not 3 power flyer like you would want your 3-drop to be. But whenever this attacks, you make a 1/1 colorless soldier artifact creature token. Again, there's so many things that make 1/1 colorless soldier artifact creature tokens. We just talked about one that's going to make a bunch of them. Then this one makes even more of them. When it attacks is cool because it has evasion. You're not worried about an attack trigger that they can just get blocked right away. And you also just have a consistent draw engine with this. If you're in a board stall, it reminds me of the 1-mana blue 1/1 flash spirit creature that if you don't really interact with it, or that maybe there's a board stall, you just get to draw your whole deck.
Yeah, it was making me think of Crypt Breaker.
Crypt Breaker too,
black
yeah.
one drop.
Yeah, yeah. I think this card's interesting. And I don't know if it breaks the soldier thing by itself, but I think it lends itself really strongly to the soldier deck that is going to be made off of this. Because I think the biggest part is the evasion, and then the evasion helps activate the second part of the card, which is create a 1/1 colorless soldier artifact creature token. And then if your opponent's not dealing with your board, you kind of just get to cement your advantage by doing the Crypt Breaker type effect. So I think it's cool.
Yeah, I don't think I'm as high on this card as you guys are. I think it's obviously like limited bomb, great in board stall
Oh,
situations.
yeah.
But outside of like board stalls, the card has to attack, so like it needs to live for an entire turn cycle.
Yep.
And the second line of text is only relevant if you already had 3 untapped soldiers. Which is, if you had that and it wasn't a board stall, you were probably already dominating the game anyway, and you probably should just be attacking. So I don't know. It will depend a lot on how often board stalls happen in the format, and otherwise it's just like a 2/3 that doesn't really achieve all that much.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
the drawing of this card isn't going to be as relevant when it's like when you're playing the aggro deck against like a mid-range control-based mid-range deck or control deck. But a lot of decks like this have really interesting mirror matches where it's like a super board stall where the board gets like 15 creatures wide, and you're just waiting for like a creature to, or a certain card like a past card like Unbreakable Formation or something to like go over the top and kill them. And if one person has this card and the other person doesn't, and it's a soldier mirror match, or even soldiers against mono white or something, soldiers wins every time. It like not even close. The soldiers player is going to have like 7 cards in hand, and the mono white aggro or whatever is going to be top decking. Also, Skystrike Officer also includes itself, so you only have to have 2 other ones other than this because you can tap it. Also, it works very well with vigilance creatures, where you can just attack and also just tap them. So it depends on how many vigilance soldiers there are. I'm not sure if there are any off the top of my head, but that makes this card even better. And it's also a flying soldier, which is interesting. Also, like a lot of like blue-white aggro, like mono-white aggro type of decks don't have a lot of flying. I can think of like Elite Spellbinder as one of them, and there's also just a flyer at some point in time in like the old White Weenies decks that like if you have 10 permanents on the board, it gains flying. I forgot what like mechanic that was, but you remember that card?
Sky Marcher
Aspirant or something like that. Like that was really annoying when it actually got flying, it started killing you. So like I can see it being a thing, but it's just something that we'll have to wait and see.
Yep.
All right. Moving on to a card that has like a lot of hype, and you know what? I think I should let Michael read this one because it's probably right up his alley. I'll give Michael the floor on this one.
Okay, so we're talking about Misery's Shadow, 1 and a black, 2/2 creature shade. If a creature an opponent controls would die, exile it instead, and it has 1 Misery Shadow gets +1/+1 until end of turn. Just a fantastic card. Fantastic card design. I do like it a lot, especially in like sideboard implications. Seems really sweet, even in the main board. And because it's a mana sink to kind of push through, it makes it hard to block for your opponent because you're like, your opponent doesn't know if you are trying to bluff or, they should put their creature in front of your Misery Shadow, or if you have something that you really want to do on your second main phase. So I think it's because the card is so flexible and has a static effect like exiling your opponent's creatures. It's really interesting. Yeah, that's what I gotta say about it.
Yeah, it also says it is also like a lot of effects like this usually say like non-token creatures, but it's like any creature, which is pretty cool. I don't know how much the 1 mana getting 1/1/+1 counter until, well, not counter, getting +1/+1 until end of turn is going to matter, but it's going to make your opponent's blocks like super tricky. Like your opponent's going to like double block in really weird spots where they shouldn't because they want to kill the Misery Shadow, and if they don't, you're just going to pay mana to eat their creature for free. So, but I'm more interested in like this card in sideboards because usually the cards that do that in Pioneer specifically are like 4 mana. There's like Kalidas that does that, and like what other card really does that? outside of like that's less than 4 mana? I can't really think of one on the top of my head. If you wanted a cheap way to remove your opponent's creatures from, stop them from going to the graveyard, specifically like Cauldron Familiar and stuff like that, this is a good 2 mana way to do that. So I'm curious to see if this takes it. It's like it's Rest in Peace on a stick, but it's like way easier to interact with, right?
Mm-hmm.
The stick is much easier to interact with, right? Like,
yeah.
And it only affects creatures, so it doesn't disrupt other combos.
Yep.
Yeah, but I think if you're going to have this effect, like Kalitas is just a much better card, is like a much better card than this. But it is a 2 mana 2/2, and it does get bigger. I don't know. I think I just like Kalitas more than this if I had to choose, even though Kalitas is 2 more mana in Pioneer. But in Standard, I don't think there's a card like this. But I also, in Standard, don't really think there's many cards that really care about going from field to the graveyard outside of, like, Tenacious Underdog, right?
Right.
I mean, it can be nice to have creatures not be in graveyards for things like Corpse Appraiser. Keeping graveyards clean affects, like, unlicensed herbs and that kind of stuff. But yeah, I don't think it's as relevant in Standard as it is in other formats.
Yeah, so I'd be surprised. I think I'd be surprised if this saw play over a card like, Tenacious Underdog or whatever other 2-drop that you want to play. But sure. I also kind of wouldn't fault you for playing this. Let's go to the next one. Mechanized Warfare. It's 1 and double red for an enchantment. Red's coming in hot with the enchantments. If a red or artifact source you control would deal damage to an opponent or permanent an opponent controls, it deals that much damage +1 instead. So it's got like a little Torbran-y feel to it.
Mm-hmm.
How do you feel about this, Michael?
It's hard to evaluate because this like does really well in like red decks that have that's aggro, that has a mixture of like powerful creatures or fast, efficient creatures and efficient direct damage stuff. And I'm not quite sure with this what's offered in the spectrum of Standard in regards to Standard of what this can imply, because you really this type of thing really excels, is like I said, in the mixture of efficient creatures and efficient damage to any target type of thing. If those two things aren't really met, I don't know how this is going to really be used or in which way. So it's red for red or artifact source. Yeah. So yeah, I'm just not. I don't know how to process this within the premise of at least Standard.
I mean, is this worth the card, Airball?
What I was trying to figure out. So I think that what's it replacing? What's the opportunity cost of playing this card? And for a 3 mana card, it's probably a 3/3. In red, it's probably got haste, or it's like a combination of a 1-drop and a 2-drop or something like that you could be using the mana for instead.
It's like a Reckless Stormseeker.
So that's probably gonna do 3 damage just on the turn it comes into play. That Stormseeker is, and it's recurring damage after the fact as well. So Warfare, at a minimum, you need to expect it to do 3 damage to outweigh a card like that, and probably a little more, because Stormseeker might get in more than once. I don't think this card makes the cut anywhere.
I think it does make the cut, and here's why. And not in the main deck. I think it's good in best of 3 against control decks and controlling mid-range decks. Especially when you're playing against certain colors that can't exile enchantments, like blue-black control, or something with white, because I don't know if you noticed, but in Standard, no one plays March of the Otherworldly Light anymore because the creature lands don't exist in Standard anymore. However, the Eye Tyrant, Den of the Bugbear, those are the main reasons why you really wanted to play that March of the Otherworldly Light in your deck. But people aren't playing that anymore, and they're playing more cards like Destroy Evil and cards like that. But if you're post board against mono red, are you keeping Destroy Evil in your deck? Probably not, because you're playing against cards that have 3, 2, and 1 toughness, and you're never going to kill an enchantment. Well, the mono red deck brings in Mechanized Warfare, and it turns all of your creatures into like mini double versions of the creature. So it doesn't matter if you keep sweeping them, you're going to have like any creature that's on the board that remains with Mechanized Warfare on the board. It's going to act like it's 2 creatures. And it makes Play with Fire deal 3 damage. It makes Lightning Strike deal 4 damage. I think this actually is relevant post board against control decks.
But the other thing that would feel like 2 creatures would be if you played a creature instead of Mechanized Warfare, right?
Well, right, but if that other creature instead of Mechanized Warfare gets swept, then you're out the creature, like forever. But with this,
Sure.
it's like throughout the course of the game, I think this will do more damage than a creature that gets removed. Even if that creature had haste, because let's say that creature had haste and it's Reckless Stormseeker against control, even though Reckless Stormseeker is very good against control anyway, so maybe this would just come in instead of like a different card. But let's just say, for example, that the card that this would be is 3 damage. This card by itself will do way more than 3 damage throughout the course of the game if that one creature that you played in this spot gets removed immediately with the infinite removal spells that the control deck has. So I think this does like at least 5 damage.
Yeah, you need to, like, how many times can you hit your opponent after this comes into play? And I think if it's more than 4, it's worth it, and if it's less, it's not. And I think it'll depend on what the other cards are.
Yeah, I personally think it is more than 4 because any single creature, it makes every creature, like, think about your control player in this instance, right? And your opponent plays, like, I don't know, a Monastery Swiftspear because, okay, spoiler alert, that's in the set. We'll talk about that later. But your opponent plays a single Swiftspear. Like, it does 2 damage now, which is not nothing. And now you have to actually care about this Swiftspear. It makes you actually have to care about some random creature on your opponent's board. And I think that's very relevant against control.
I think we're all speaking the same thing, but
Yeah,
like I think the point that I'm driving is like there needs to be a good, healthy balance for mono red, like a strictly mono red deck that has a good balance of efficient creatures and efficient direct damage to any source or to any like target. If those 2 things don't meet, then this card can't really perform like you would like it to, because there exists removal, there exists sweepers, it makes it hard. The thing that you're saying against a control deck, it makes it harder for a control deck to interact with you when something like this exists, when you have both efficient creatures and efficient direct damage stuff, because they don't know they have to hope that their cards line up correctly to deal with you efficiently as answers to this question. If you lean more towards creatures or you lean more towards efficient direct damage, a control deck can slot into that and kind of mess you up. So the 2 like perfectly balanced things of efficient creatures and efficient direct damage stuff needs to be met in order for this card to kind of get there.
Yeah, I do think that this kind of like puts a different axis on mono red that the control deck might not be thinking about and being prepared for. All right, moving on to the next one. And this is a series of commands that we're going to go over. There's 5 different ones. The white one is called Kayla's command. 1 and double white for a sorcery. Choose 2. Create a 2/2 colorless construct artifact creature token. Put a +1/+1 counter on a creature you control. It gains double strike till end of turn. Search your library for a basic plains card, reveal it, put it into your hand, then shuffle. And you gain 2 life and scry 2. Which modes are you 2 using with this?
I would say probably the colorless construct and the +1/+1 on a creature. Maybe sometimes the plains, but probably the first 2. More often than not.
Like, are you ever just gaining 2 life and scrying 2 as a part of a 3-mana sorcery? I don't know. I feel like if this said gain 2 life, scry 1 draw card, it'd be like much better. But isn't that like a blue card? I don't know. What do you think, Airball?
So I was thinking that maybe you would do something like that in the sad case where you don't have a creature on the board already. But I actually think that the way this card resolves, and I might need a judge, you can create the construct and put the +1/+1 counter on it on the same turn.
That is true. It resolves in sequence.
But you have to target, right?
No, because it just says on a creature you control.
Right. Yeah, it doesn't target. So you can make the 2/2 and put a 1/1 counter on it. But is a 3-mana 3/3 like good enough for a 3-mana sorcery?
I think as like the fail state of the card, that's not a bad floor. And sometimes it's just going to win you games coming off the top when you have 1 creature and it just sneaks through an extra 5 damage. Because you have a 4/4 in play or something, and the opponent thought that they could tap out.
That's true, but this card kind of reminds me of like Cavalry Charm, and that card's not even good. And that's an instant.
Yeah, I don't think it's good. I think white has better 3-drops, but I don't think it's awful.
I think this is like this is like something really cool limited card, but I don't see myself ever playing this card in like a mono white deck.
Yeah, this card would be even more powerful like even if you did 4 mana and it was an instant, then I'd be like, all right, maybe we're talking about something. But like because it's a sorcery, it really like loses percentage points in my mind,
Yeah, for
especially
sure.
in a mono white deck. Yeah.
Imagine if this was an instant and you can like +1/+1 counter and double strike like after blocks. Like that'd be really
Yeah.
cool.
Sick.
Like imagine make a 2/2 and then give another thing +1/+1 and double strike, and then you can just like blow out your opponent with this. That'd be pretty cool.
Yeah.
Maybe Wizards just thought it was too good if it was an instant.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on to Urza's command. Oh gosh, it's a 4 mana instant. Choose 2. Creatures you don't control get -2/-0 until end of turn. Wait. Airball, you say the rest of it. This is probably your command.
Really? You're going to hand it off to me before you read the second mode, which is create a tapped Power Stone token.
Yeah, I wanted you to read that because it's just funny.
All right, I appreciate that. All right, the third mode. Create a tapped 0/0 colorless construct artifact creature token. With this creature gets +1/+1 for each artifact you control. So it's a car instruct. And the last mode is scry 1, draw. Well, Mr. Power Stone Stan, what do you think of this card?
I mean, this is not Cryptic Command, not even close. Like, how does Urza's command as a mono blue command not counter a spell? Like, I don't actually understand. It doesn't counter anything. It doesn't even counter anything conditionally. It doesn't even counter like an artifact. I don't know. Why does this not counter a spell? I don't know. But you can do the cool thing, like creatures you don't control get -2/-0, and then make the card instruct and then blow them out that way. Or you can just make two power. Wait, you can't make 2 Power Stone tokens, but you could make a Power Stone token and then make a card instruct, and that counts as 2 artifacts for like a following play. You could do that. You can scry 1, draw a card, and pseudo fog your opponent, I guess, if you're just like grasping at straws or something. I think this card could definitely be better. Like, when are you ever creating a tapped Power Stone token unless you're playing a deck based around that? I would think that in order to get really good use out of artifacts, they would need this card to have like Convoke or something, even though Convoke isn't really a mechanic that's in this set for some reason. But not Convoke, the Affinity, right? Like I don't really know how to evaluate this other than like maybe it can blow out your opponent when they attack you, but that's a 4 mana card. Like if you're playing this against an aggro deck, wouldn't you just want a sweeper if you're playing like blue-white control? And like, are you playing Urza's command in mono blue? I don't even really know.
I look at the last 2 modes and I think worse Shark Typhoon. Like you have the 2 modes. You make a big creature, you draw a card. It's like cycling a Shark Typhoon, except it's counterable. It needs existing battlefield support to be any good at all, and you can't scale it with your mana. So I think this card is pretty poor. But maybe there's some Power Stone deck
I just wish this card was better. Like, there's so many ways it could have been better, but maybe they're just trying to like scale down a card that like could have been as good as Cryptic Command, right?
Yeah, it's just like this is supposed to be for a deck that cares about artifacts. There's really no other way to say it. Like, that's the only way this card is good. So that's all.
I mean, yeah, if you're playing like a Tezzeret deck or something, where I can see Tezzeret seeing a lot more play now that there's an artifact set, that you could probably, with the proper setup, and maybe your deck already does this anyways and makes a bunch of Power Stone tokens. I don't know, maybe you play Karn. You can make a tapped Power Stone token and make like a 9/9 construct. Like, that's good enough for 4 mana. Like, the construct and the Power Stone count towards the power and toughness of the construct. So if you already have like 3 or 4 random artifacts on the battlefield, like you have a Bankbuster sitting there, you have a treasure token sitting there, you have a couple Power Stones sitting there, all of a sudden this construct is like a 7/7. And I mean, that's good enough for an instant speed 4 mana card, right?
Sure.
So like this card I think is not good unless it's in a very niche deck, but in that specific deck I think it's really powerful.
Yep.
All right, moving on to Gix's command. 5 mana sorcery. Choose 2. Put 2 +1/+1 counters on up to 1 creature. It gains lifelink till end of turn. Destroy each creature with power 2 or less. Return up to 2 creature cards from your graveyard to your hand. Each opponent sacrifice a creature with the highest power among creatures they control. This is 5 mana. And it's a sorcery. Like, this card has to be better than Cruelty of Gix, right? In order to even see play in a deck.
Exactly.
And yeah, I understand that you can do the destroy each creature with power 2 or less mode and the each opponent sacrifices a creature with the highest power among creatures you control. I understand like you can do that, so if your opponent's board state is like a little diverse, you might be able to kill most things, but it's a 5 mana card. Like you would think that it's a 5 mana card, you should be able to kill everything, right? It should be like a Shadow's Verdict or something, not like a conditional, maybe hopefully pray that you get rid of their board. Putting 2+1/+1 counters on up to one creature and getting lifelink, like I don't know, would you ever do that for 5 mana? Like I guess you could do this plus regrow up to 2 creatures from graveyard to your hand. But like, how dirtily does your deck have to be for this card to be good? Like, I don't know. How do you evaluate this, guys?
If you're ahead, this card is great. Like, if the part that you mentioned, like if you're ahead, you want the +1/+1 counters plus the return the creatures cards from your graveyard to your hand. That's really great. I think like, sorry, I should have said this before I even started. This is a sideboard card. Like I don't really care to process it really in terms of like main board or it belongs in a deck. It's like depending on the meta, this is a sideboard card, and if the meta doesn't call for it, then it's a doesn't see play card.
I don't know. What do you think,
I
Airball?
think that's pretty much exact. I think that's pretty much exactly right. But I do want to point out that you were saying that you would expect to be able to wipe the entire board for 5 mana, but I think part of the point of this card is that you're supposed to play it with creatures with power 2 or more, so that you can, with the proper deck construction, make it a one-sided board wipe. Because if it said destroy all creatures, then you'd have to destroy your own stuff too. I think they're trying to force you to build a deck in a certain way.
Right, but isn't there like the Malicious Malfunction, and there's a bunch of cards that are like way less mana that do this if that's the game plan. There's so many cards, there's already like a couple cards in Standard right now that deal -2/-2 to everything, or -3/-3 to everything. Like there's at least 2 cards right now that I can think of off the top of my head that do -2/-2 to everything. And I understand that Gate's command kills certain cards that don't have 2 toughness, like, Raffine, that this card kills. If Raffine doesn't have 3 or more power, there's a few more cards that I can think of that have less power but more toughness. But are you boarding this in against that, or are you just boarding in a card that can just say like target opponent sacrifices target Raffine, right? Wouldn't you like rather have that card, because that card's probably 3 mana or 2 mana?
Yeah. I think this is like classic Magic players overvalue flexibility as opposed to mana efficiency kind of thing. It looks good because it can do a bunch of different things, but in practice, it's just too expensive at doing any one of them.
Right.
Yep.
All right, moving on to Mishra's Command, which is a little bit better on the mana, potentially, if you want it to be. It's an X and a red sorcery. Choose 2. Choose target player. They may discard up to X cards, then they draw a card for each card discarded this way. This spell deals X damage to target creature. This spell deals X damage to target planeswalker. Target creature gets +X/+O and gains haste until end of turn. Michael, which modes are you using with this?
I mean, I think the first one and possibly the second one more often than not. If I was gonna use this card, like the X to target planeswalker and target creature gets +X is kind of just like niche, depending on like the game state, but or like the +X/+O could also end the game. It's also not instant, obviously, but yeah, I think it's the first 2 more often than not. That's what I'm gonna say.
All right, for you, Airball, because I know what I'm going to say about this card. I just want to hear what you say first.
This card reads combo enabler to me. Like dig for your combo piece. If that combo piece is a creature, it puts it in play. You can give it haste, kill someone right away, and it also keeps you alive by killing whatever creature might be attacking you. This is like one of those cases where I think the flexibility is actually pretty good if you can put it in the right deck, like an Indomitable Creativity kind of thing or something like that.
I mean, it being sorcery speed just like makes it way, way less good. But I think casting Mishra's Command for X equals like 2 or 3 is really strong to be in a Boros Reanimator deck when you have Invoke Justice. And right now that deck's playing like Cathartic Pyre, Fable of the Mirror Breaker, and they're playing a bunch of discard outlets and things. And maybe you play Big Score, maybe you don't. But Mishra's Command kind of combines the thing that Big Score does, but also can kill something. So say you cast this for 3 mana, and you get to kill their creature and discard 2 cards and draw 2 cards. That's like really good, right? especially because that's what your deck already wants to be doing. I think since it can do both of those, and it's X and 1 red instead of like way more, you can just kill a Thalia with this. If you want to, you can just like pay 3 mana, X equals 1, kill the Thalia, discard, draw. Which is like not the worst, especially if your deck already wants to discard. The fact that this says that both modes is a different mode is X to a creature and the other mode is X to a planeswalker. Like, why didn't they do like the same mode, like X to a creature or planeswalker? I feel like this could have had like one other thing, like make a treasure token or something on it, or exile the top card of your library, you can cast it to the end of next turn or something like that. But that these types of cards usually say, but like maybe that was too good and they tested it already. But I think Mishra's Command is one of the best commands that in this cycle, if not the best. But I don't have very high hopes for this set of commands anyway.
Yeah, my last note is just like this is one of the cards that would go into the critical mass of making mechanized warfare good if there was a way to make it good. This would be probably 1 or 2 of those cards in that deck. If not saying it's a thing, just saying if it became a thing, I would assume 1 or 2 of these would sneak its way into that deck.
Yeah, I don't not like this card, but I also don't like love it either. Moving on to the last one, it's a green one. It's a 6 mana command. Oh my goodness, and it's a sorcery. Choose 2, Titania's Command. Exile target player's graveyard. You gain 1 life for each card exiled this way. Search your library for up to 2 land cards. Put them onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle. Create 2/2 green bear creature tokens. Hey, there's that bear word. And then put 2 +1/+1 counters on each creature you control. So this is kind of an overrun that doesn't give trample. It exiles a grave, it like gains life. It's like Primal Command, but much worse, like way worse. I don't know, like what is up with like a 6 mana card ramping you? Like, why would you ever do that?
Nope.
Well, it's just lands. So you could search for the legendary Titania land if you haven't found it yet.
Oh wait, it's up to 2 lands, not basic lands. Okay, I think differently.
Yeah.
It's any 2
it's
lands.
Still bad. I agree with you.
It's still like bad, but it gets the Titania land if that's what you're going for.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, there's a case where like maybe this is good and you have Titania and for some reason you can cast this the turn after you have Titania. That's the only thing I could think of. That's
Wait, you're missing the best, most spiciest part. This helps cast 1 with the multiverse ahead of schedule.
Oh shit. Good call. and if you cast this for free off of 1 with the multiverse, then you're laughing.
Like all hell will break loose. I mean, that's just too good of a combo. Oh my god!
Sheesh,
can you imagine the deck coming together? Freaking Simic ramp.
You heard it here first, folks.
That's a limited bomb.
It's a limited bomb. I guess you make the 2/2 bears and put counters on creatures. I mean, you make the bears before you put the counters on. So they're actually 4/4 bears, right?
Yeah, you get 8 power toughness for 6 mana. It's not inspiring, but in draft, that's often just good enough.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's actually perfect. These commands are not inspiring, but sometimes might be good enough. In draft. Okay, moving on. Lauren of the Third Path. It's a 2 and a white for a human artificer legendary. 2/1. It has vigilance. When Lauren of the Third Path enters the battlefield, destroy up to 1 target artifact or enchantment. You can tap it to have you and target opponent each draw a card. Okay, what is up with white cards making both players draw a card? That's like the 3rd one I've seen. Like, white cards want your opponent to do things with you, right? There's like Divine Gambit that makes your opponent play a card too. There's like what is up with these cards? There's like that one alchemy card that's like kills a thing, but your opponent also gets a thing to replace it. Like, white is like helping your opponent at all costs. Like, why does it make your opponent draw a card? Like, what? Like, I guess the only card I can think of that's like actually good enough and standard that makes you draw a card in white that doesn't make your opponent draw a card is Wedding Announcement, and that card's everywhere in white. So like, I don't know how to evaluate this card. It's a 2/1 vigilance. It's always going to get blocked because it's a 2/1. But I guess if you think about it as like just Reclamation Sage, it's like a slightly better Reclamation Sage. I don't know. What do you think?
We haven't got to the card that we want to talk about at some point later on, but you just play this other card than this card. This is not a good card.
I mean, is it better than the Outland Liberator card in white, the flash thing?
No.
Like Cathar Commando, right? Is it better than
No, that
Cathar
is a much
Commando?
better card. That is a way better card.
Like,
Cathar Commando's got flash. It's not a legendary. It's a 3/1. It's, I think, cheaper. There's a lot of things not to like about this card.
Mhm.
are you ever using the tap ability?
No.
No.
You don't want to share the love? You don't want your opponent to have cards?
If you have it, the Fairy Planeswalker, it gives you one loyalty, bro.
Actually, I can tell you.
If you have Narset.
I can tell you, and I'm actually not messing around. I'm gonna play this in a standard deck. I'm not kidding. I don't like it, but I'm gonna play it. There's a 4-color Vivian on the Hunt birthing pod standard deck that I play that's really freaking fun. And it would really use a 3-drop that can kill an artifact or enchantment. It's hilarious, but like you can tutor for this onto the battlefield. I love it. It's like a really bad Knight of Autumn.
All right, so this is the next deck after your Power Stone deck.
I'm already playing the Vivian deck in standard right now. It's not that bad. I was playing it on stream today. It's not that bad. I mean, Vivian on the Hunt's a really good card, and this card will go in it as a one of. That's all I'm going to say.
Okay.
Moving on to the next one is another card that we can ramp into. That's in blue. It's a legendary artifact called the Temporal Anchor. There's a lot of freaking huge blue spells. It's 3 and triple blue for a 6-mana legendary artifact. At the beginning of your upkeep, scry 2. Whenever you choose to put one or more cards in the bottom of your library while scrying, exile that many cards from the bottom of your library. During your turn, you may play cards exiled with the Temporal Anchor. Okay, so I'm going to let Airball evaluate this first. Like, what are you doing with this, if anything?
Well, the first thing I need to know is it the cards that you scried to the bottom that get exiled, or was it just the, like, you scried 2 to the bottom, but the 2 that were previously on the bottom are what get exiled? Because what I'm reading it as, it's the cards that you scried to the bottom.
Yeah, it doesn't say just put the cards, exile them from the bottom instead or anything. It's the cards that you put to the bottom, because it says while scrying.
Yeah, if that's true, then I think this card is actually, given the Power Stone support in the set, is actually good.
That sounds like that sounds like a question.
Well, I don't know. 6 mana artifact makes me sad, but if it's not practically 6 mana because Power Stones are staple to everything, then maybe it's fine. And you instantly get to draw 2 cards on your upkeep when this comes into play.
Oh, you have to wait a whole turn.
Yeah, but if you get to play it for effectively 3 mana because you had 3 Power Stones that weren't doing anything else, I think this card is fine.
Like there's like Terra Sunder, a Braid, like there's a bunch of artifact destruction, and like there's a lot of like non-land permanent exile and stuff in standard right now.
There's Lauren of the Third Path who could come in.
I mean that's the reason why I'm playing Lauren of the Third Path. Like the card's broken, especially against specifically the Temporal Anchor. But the fact that it's an artifact means that you can like officially ramp into it. I agree. So if you're playing some like artifact based like Tezzeret Karn deck, like think about it. You can play Karn on turn 4, make a Power Stone token. Next turn, untap land, Temporal Anchor, easy peasy.
Yeah, this card's hard to evaluate because it's kind of like a similar thing to, what was that, like Midnight Hunt or Innistrad card that had like the artifact that like you tap it and becomes day or night, and then you get a card. It's like it's Celestis-esque for me to try and evaluate. Like no one knew that card was going to be like that great off the jump. It was like it was whispered about before the set was dropped, and then we started seeing how it could be used, and it's like ceiling in its floor. And I for Temporal Anchor, that's the same thing for me. It's like a hard to evaluate artifact, which, you know, I can't really evaluate the ceiling or the floor on it, to be honest.
I kind of like that you can just like, it's beginning of your upkeep, so you get to draw the card that you put on top. So you like put your counterspell on top to actually draw, and you put the card that you like want to play like on the bottom, and then you get to exile it. And it says you can play them, so you can just like put the lands in exile, and then you can just play the lands. And it says during your turn you can play cards exile with Temporal Anchor. It doesn't say like this turn. So you just like exile all the lands with Temporal Anchor and just like play them every turn. It's like a lot of card advantage for for one card to give you.
See, yeah, and that's what I'm talking about. Like, I didn't even think about the implications of that. Like, I think it's just it needs to be put into practice to see like what this thing actually does.
This is an extremely powerful effect, but it does need some support from the other artifacts to be any good.
Yeah. All right. And I'm probably going to put this into some kind of Power Stone deck. Because I'm building that.
Yep.
Unfortunately, I can't participate in early access or I would, but I will be in Salt Lake City with you, Airball, my friend.
Mm-hmm. Me too. I too will be there with Airball.
Will you be there, Michael?
I mean, I would like to go. I've had family things happen, so like I can't. Or not real life stuff happens, so my finances have been weird. But I'm planning to go to Philadelphia. So if it's something that you two are going to be going
I'll
to,
be going to Philly.
Yeah, I intend to go to Magic events. I've been putting that on hold, but it will happen.
When I said Airball is my friend, you gave me a little face for those not watching on YouTube. I mean, you're my friend too, Michael. You're just not going to Utah.
That's correct. That is very correct. I'm not going to Utah, and I am FOMOing. I did FOMO the Magic. I'm gonna FOMO Salt Lake, but I love that you folks are having a good time. I actually am very happy seeing everyone who I know having a good time.
All right, talk about something having a good time. We'll move on to the next one. Fateful Handoff. 3 and a black for a sorcery. Draw cards equal to the mana value of target artifact or creature you control. And here's the kicker. I mean, it's not actually a kicker, but here's the, it's a figure of speech, guys. Just go along with me. An opponent gains control of that permanent. What?
Huh.
So you play your Temporal Anchor, and then you draw 6 cards and give the Temporal Anchor to your opponent?
How about like, oh no, I was thinking like Leyline Binding or something like that, but it's artifact or creature.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, is there an artifact that kind of does the exile till this leaves the battlefield? No, right?
Not that I can think of.
But if there was one... Wait, oh my goodness, we haven't gotten to this yet, but in Brothers War, there's like really expensive artifacts that you can pay like 3 mana for. The artifact creatures, so you can like prototype those in for 3 and then draw 7 and give them the 3/3.
Yeah.
That is pretty good.
So 4 mana, draw like 6 or 7, but you give your opponent the creature. That's like massive tempo loss.
That's interesting, because I wonder if there's one that's like you can min-max by a lot.
Yeah, there's the 7 mana one that you can cast for 3. So
That's
like it's like 1 in double black, but it's really a 7-drop. So like, do you give your opponent the 3/3? I think it has Menace and Lifelink too. Do you give your opponent like a Menace Lifelink 3/3 just to draw 7?
I mean, for Airball, I feel like that's like yeah.
I mean, Airball's motto is like, why win when you can draw cards? So like,
Airball's face is making math. He's there's like math figures playing in his head right now.
Like there's like you know those memes where it's like it has the math going on in the head, like.
I'm just looking for shit tier artifacts right now.
He's mathing over there.
Like I think it works best with the prototype artifacts, but like, what else are you finding, Airball?
Oh, I mean, just looking at Arcane Proxy, it's a 7 mana artifact with an ETB that just leaves a 4/3 behind. Like, or it leaves a 2/1 behind if you cast it for the prototype. So you get the ETB effect, and the opponent gets a 2/1, and you draw 7.
I mean,
oh.
I mean, will you be doing this?
No,
because you're gonna draw a Fateful Handoff. You're not gonna have any artifacts or like a Power Stone. And you're like, draw 0, you get a Power Stone.
Yeah, because like the problem with Fateful Handoff is you've got to be playing cards that you're willing to give to your opponent, which means that the cards aren't that good, which means you probably shouldn't be playing them, which means you shouldn't be playing Fateful Handoff.
Yeah, so it's like, this card's not good, so you shouldn't be playing this card that's only good when you have not good cards, so don't play it.
Yeah.
Yes.
True.
Okay, so is that like the opposite of a win more card? It's like a win less card.
You're handing off the game to your opponent. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what it is. It's like, take this W. I'm gonna take this L. I trade you 1 W and I receive 1 L.
It's like you just play this when you just want to punt the game. You're just like, here you go.
Someone's gonna play
really
it too.
hoping I was really hoping I could give someone a demonic pact with this, but artifact or creature only.
Oh yeah.
come
Oh
on.
my gosh! Wait. You
Yeah,
can
that's
give
the
them
only thing I thought
Solkanar,
of.
and then it goes back to your board.
Demonic Pact is the only thing that's like the coolest thing you can do with this thing. I
Wait,
think.
hold on. You can when your Solkanar is going to trigger on your end step, you fateful hand off the Solkanar back to your
There you go.
opponent, and then you draw 5, and then they give it back to you, the Solkanar.
But it's sorcery. You can't. It's right. You said
yeah. When it's like the Solkanar is an end step trigger, right?
Oh, okay.
So
makes sense.
when it's about to go to your opponent, you fateful hand
There it
off
is.
it to them, and then they like hit you with the Solkanar or whatever for 5. But it's okay.
Mhm.
You've drawn 5 cards from fateful hand off.
There it
and
is.
then and then on their end step, it triggers that card, and then it comes back to you. Sure, I guess whatever. That was the most fun I've ever had on this podcast. Clip it, record it, whatever you got to do. Anyway,
There we go.
Brotherhood's End is a 1 and a double red sorcery. Choose one. Brotherhood's End deals 3 damage to each creature and each planeswalker. Or you can destroy all artifacts with mana value 3 or less. Now, this is a 3 mana sorcery in the same exact color combination as, I don't know, what's it, Sweltering Suns? There's also, like, Anger of the Gods that are, like, really powerful in Pioneer. And
this is
I
Planeswalkers.
think this card's better than both of them.
Yeah, I also think this card may have I don't know what you call it though, like in older formats other than standard, this may have good implications for like modern and Pioneer. I mean, you mentioned Pioneer already, but like yeah, it's a 3 mana like clear artifacts, and there's a lot of artifact stuff in other formats, so like yeah, I think it's interesting. I think it could be good.
There's Rakdos Sacrifice that has a bunch of witches ovens and blood tokens and treasures hanging around that you're definitely going to want to deal with. There's also going to be a lot of artifact synergies going around with it kills all the power stones, all the treasures, all the blood tokens, and it's also just kills Mayhem Devil at 3 toughness and just is a generic really freaking good sweeper.
Yeah.
Early game, the only things it doesn't deal with off the top of my head is like Adeline and Rafine, but like everything else it deals with. What's your evaluation on this, Airball?
Yeah, it's like Burn Down the House's younger brother. 3 damage to planeswalkers is relevant to planeswalkers that have minus, but not so much ones that have plussed. So that's kind of like an interesting dynamic. Stapling on destroy all artifacts CMC 3 or less. Yeah, it's I feel like Rakdos Sacrifice has kind of been hated out pretty hard of like every format that it exists in right now. Except maybe Alchemy. I don't play that one, so maybe it gets play there. I feel like this is probably worse than Anger of the Gods, but there are some metas where it's better because it can answer a Wandering Emperor that's minus, it can answer a Kaito that's minus, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, Liliana of the Veil almost always minuses first. Wandering Emperor almost always minuses first. Like, there's a lot of planeswalkers that are playing right now that usually the first thing they do is minus. I mean, I guess outside of Teferi Hero of Dominaria, because it untaps the land, so you can kind of protect it anyway without having to minus first. But Brotherhood's End could definitely deal with a lot of things. I mean, it also deals with let's see, Ob Nixilis, like both of them, which is pretty strong. So I guess in every single way against Rakdos Sacrifice, this card is really good.
Yeah,
because they also play Ob Nixilis.
Yeah.
So I mean, this card, like, I don't think Standard has had a deal 3 damage to each creature effect since like Deafening Clarion. And Deafening Clarion was like a huge staple in the format back in what was that, War of the Spark? So like I think during that Standard it was a really good card. What was that?
Clarion was Guilds of Ravnica.
Oh yeah, but it was in that Standard. Like Guilds of Ravnica was still in that Standard, but that was like a go-to sweeper that, like, if someone was playing red-white against you and had that, you were done, you were cooked. This card's gonna be really, really powerful, and I think it's just really freaking good. Moving on to Gwenna, Eyes of Gaia, 3 mana, 2/3, legendary creature, Elf Druid Scout. Tap, add 2 mana in any combination of colors. Spend this mana only to cast creature spells or activate abilities of a creature or creature card. Whenever you cast a creature spell with power 5 or greater, put a +1/+1 counter on Gwenna, Eyes of Gaia, and untap it. Okay. This kind of gives me like Rishkar vibes, to where it can like add more mana than it probably already gave you. Like like I don't know. This card seems really good actually. Like you can actually use this play this as a commander and play like a bunch of stuff with power 5 or greater in your deck and just have this as your commander. But even in a regular deck, like what are the 3 mana cards that you're really playing that like kind of ramp you in green right now? You're playing like the 3 mana 3/3 thing that makes a treasure. You're playing like Topiary Stomper. Like, is this better than those cards? How do you evaluate this card, guys?
I have no idea how to evaluate this card. If it actually makes its way into a deck, it gets a little bit scary. But I don't know what that deck looks like because it's kind of the similar thing of it feels a little bit kind of like a weird the Great Henge in a way. Like whenever there was like times where you can untap Great Henge. I forget there was maybe sometime at some point where it was like historic or something. But yeah, I think if you can actually play this card, the ceiling gets pretty intense. If you actually slot this into a deck and it works.
Well, I don't know. I kind of feel like if you untap with this, it's like you can run away with it. What do you think, Airball?
Yeah, I mean, you got to get the bad out of the way first, right? It dies to cut down. It costs 3 mana, and the mana can only be spent on creatures. However, if you do cast a 5 power creature spell, then you got the 2 mana discount for putting this into play, and then you untap it again for another 2 mana you can spend on another thing. So there might be ways to even go infinite if you have ways to pump creatures that ETB. Probably not. I haven't seen anything that does that yet. But this, if you untap with it, is bonkers, and it's kind of got like the Kiora effect going on.
Like the extreme. Two things that you two have alluded to with this card, both draw cards. Like Kiora draws cards, and Great Henge draws cards. This doesn't draw cards, and also this is 5 or greater. It has to be on the stack because it's a cast trigger. But there's a lot of cards that you can play in like a mono green or green X deck that already have 5 power. There's a lot of cards in this set already that have 5 power. Also a lot of really expensive cards like the big prototype artifacts have more than 5 power or greater as well. So being able to use this for 2 mana and untap it and use it for 2 mana again is really strong. But also think about this: tapping it, adding 2 mana, casting something with power 5 or greater, putting a 1/1 counter on it, untapping it, and then just attacking for 3. At that point, it's a 3 mana 3/4, and then next turn it can get even bigger. So like this gets out of hand like really fast. And I think I put it more like Gala Greeters. Like if you don't remove it right away, it can just like get out of hand. The only caveat being this is legendary and Gala Greeters isn't, but I feel like if you untap with this, you're very likely to just win the game on the spot, and it's like you have to remove this card.
Yeah, I'm thinking like put this in a deck with like the mono green Stompy deck in Explorer or Pioneer, right? You have your Steel Leaf Champion, you have your Galtas, you have that kind of crap.
Right, exactly. All right, so I think that card's really powerful. Also, it's a really freaking good mono green commander. All right, Kayla's Reconstruction. X and triple white for a sorcery. Look at the top 7 cards of your library. Put up to X artifacts and or creature cards with mana value 3 or less from among them onto the battlefield. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. It says mana value 3 or less, so if you're playing this, you're going to have to be playing a lot of artifacts or creatures with mana value 3 or less. Not very hard to do. But the thing I struggle to find with this card, just at first glance reading this, is like what deck wants this? If you're playing creatures and artifacts with mana value 3 or less, do you really want to be paying like 5 or 6 mana for a sorcery? Right?
Nope.
I think it does exactly what it says on the tin. It's Reconstruction. It's a card that you play after your opponent has been forced to tap out for a board wipe. It's like White's answer to Collected Company. Opponent has racked your board. They're tapped out. You cast it for X equals 2 or X equals 3, and boom, you have a board again for 1 card, and they're right on the back foot all over again.
Yep.
Yeah, it's not an instant, but yeah, I can see where that can happen when your opponent board wipes you. I didn't see that it looks at the top 7 regardless of how much X is, but it's always 7.
Mm-hmm.
So you can pay 5 or 6 for this and just get 3 things. It says artifacts and or creatures, so you're not like as locked into playing like infinite creatures in your deck to actually make this card viable. I don't know. I don't know if this card will be. I think this card's either really bad or really broken, and there's probably no in between.
I think it's better than Elspeth.
Better than Elspeth Resplendent.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean they both do like way different things though, right? Like Elspeth Resplendent gives you like one card. This specifically also doesn't say enchantments, so you can't get like a wedding announcement off this card or anything. So you're going to be less inclined to play cards like that than you would be in Kalo's with a deck with Kalo's Reconstruction in it. So maybe it just goes in an aggro deck without like a bunch of enchantments, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's what I mean. I think it's better in that context than an Elspeth is. Like Elspeth is like traditionally a post-wrath play as well. I think this is a better one, and I think the only good white deck, like with the mana to like that kind of devotion to white, is the aggressive creature version.
Yeah, I think it's a good sideboard card. That's kind of my viewpoint on it. It's good against control if you need a sideboard plan.
That's true, and control is more likely to board out counter spells against your Thalia deck anyway. All right, moving on to the next card, Drafna, Founder of Latinum. It is a 1 and a blue for a 2/1 legendary creature, human artificer advisor. You can pay 1 and a blue to return target artifact you control to its owner's hand. You can pay 3 and tap it to copy target artifact spell you control. The copy becomes a token. So it's copying an artifact spell on the stack. It says copy target artifact spell, not specifically artifact. So how do you evaluate this card? Is this a card that's like super niche? It probably doesn't see a lot of play, right?
Not unless there's a way to treat the power prototypes out or do something really wonky with like the prototypes.
Like, why would you return an artifact to the hand? Is what I'm thinking.
No idea. It's like, because that's always a powerful thing when you have an ETB thing or a tap or instant like tap to do a thing. And if those aren't the cases, then I don't know what you're really doing with the return target artifact you control to its owner's hand, and I don't know what you're doing with the 3 and a tap copy target artifact spell you control unless you're doing something really busted.
I feel like this is like a jank brewer's dream of a card.
Mm-hmm.
But what do you think, Airball?
I think it is, but I think it might be on the better side of jank dream. Like return target artifact you control to its owner's hand. I mean, you can imagine you have an artifact creature or something, or you have like a thought monitor in play that right now would be recast for 1 mana.
Oh,
as
for
a
sure.
Drifter.
Thought monitor will be insane.
That's pretty good. And the copy target artifact spell you control, you can do that in response to the spell being countered, right? So one of the problems with like say you cast your whatever the hell that card was, the one that scries 2 on your upkeep. You cast that with your power stones. You cast with your power stone shards. Opponent counters it because that's what you do to 6 mana sorcery speed cards, and you copy this in response and you get it anyway.
You do have to have 9 mana for that though.
Well, I mean, that's if you have the Power Stone shards, is what I'm saying.
This
if you have Power Stones, gets a lot better when.
Yeah, you can use the Power Stones to cast the card you were talking about, which is the Temporal Anchor. But you can also use the Power Stones to use Drafna's ability. So, because of the Power Stones' presence in this set, and maybe Power Stones become like a staple in order to pay for powerful things like this, it makes it a lot easier to do these. I'm just not sure how often you're going to be doing something like that to make it worth playing. Like maybe it's like a one of or something. It's also legendary, so you can't really play too many of them.
Yeah.
All right, moving on to the next one, Gixian Puppeteer. This is a 4 mana 4/3 for 3 and a black for a creature Phyrexian Warlock. Whenever you draw your second card each turn, each opponent loses 2 life and you gain 2 life. When Gixian Puppeteer dies, return another target creature card of mana value 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. I don't know how easy it's going to be to draw more than 1 card a turn outside of, Teferi that we already went over. I know that it's really easy to do that with like cards like that Connive, right? Maybe like a what is it called? Like turn 3 Rafine, turn 4 cast Gixian Puppeteer, attack with Rafine. You'll draw your second card and then you drain for 2. Like draining 2 is a lot. Like dealing 2 damage like Shieldred adds up. Everyone's lost to Shieldred. And then when this dies, you get to bring another creature back from the grave. And it's a 4 mana 4/3. How are you thinking about it being costed 4 mana? Like, what do you think about the 3 toughness? Like, how do you evaluate this card?
I think it's interesting for those decks, those Esper decks, because it makes it the mana cost restraints aren't so bad for the double black for Shieldred if you're running that in your Esper deck, and if you're playing this instead, it's still a really good effect and doing nearly the same thing, not quite, but then you can also, return another target creature card with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard to your hand when this thing dies.
Oh,
So
Battlefield.
it's also onto the battlefield. So I think that's really interesting too, because it can also make your opponent's removal bad in a sense. So and I love warlocks. I'm a warlock man in D&D, but so there's a great thing. But I think this could be really interesting thinking about the current Esper decks of whether you play this or Shieldred, or what's the thought process there.
What do you think, Airball?
I mean, I've been practicing for the historic tournament tomorrow, and I'm just thinking of this card with Diviner of Fates, and holy crap. The conniving, you connive, you draw 2 effectively just off of connive. That triggers this. And then when this dies, if the opponent rafts the board, then you get the Diviner of Fates back out of the bin.
That's true.
And this whole thing starts all over again.
I don't know. It seems pretty good. I don't know how niche or not this is going to be, but you're going to have to choose whether you want to play this. There's a lot of 4-drop options, right? Especially if you're playing Esper. If you're playing Rafine, and maybe you're playing Ledger Shredder or something that connives really well, or other things that draw additional cards like Wedding Announcement. I can see this playing in some kind of Esper mid-range deck. But if you're doing that, you're playing Wandering Emperor at 4 mana, you're playing Shieldred at 4 mana, you're playing even Urtai Resurrected at 4 mana. Are you also playing Gixian Puppeteer? There's a lot of 4 mana cards to play. How many of those are you going to actually fit in your deck is my question.
I just think it's easier on your mana, right? Because it's not double black. So which Shieldred is, and this is a single black. So right. I think it's a big concession as far as deck smoothness. So I don't know, but it does bring up that question.
When Gixian Puppeteer dies, you do get to just bring back Rafine from the graveyard. So there's a lot of pluses for this card being in your deck. All right, moving on to the next one is a 6 mana dragon. 4 and double red for a dragon called Tyrant of Kerr Ridges. And I think I actually have an idea for this card, so let's see what it says. It has flying, of course. It's a 4/5. When Tyrant of Kerr Ridges enters the battlefield, it deals 4 damage to any target. And you can pay 1 to have Tyrant of Kerr Ridges get +1/+0 till end of turn. So, fire breathing. There's a thing I have with this card, and you know that Boros Reanimator deck I was talking about before? You can even in Jund Reanimator, you can go Fable the Mirror Breaker and then discard this card, and then you can Cruelty of Gix the very following turn, bring this back and deal 4 damage to anything. Your opponent's Planeswalker, their creature. Now you have a 4/5 and they have no board, and you can even, this isn't legendary, so you can even blink. You can even make copies of this with Reflection of Kiki-Jiki and just start shooting 4 damage. This card's really good if you're doing that. If you're not playing Cruelty of Gix and ways to discard this, you can also play it in the Invoke Calamities deck and discard this card with a bunch of discard outlets. You're playing the pseudo combo deck that I was talking about earlier. You can bring back Sanctuary Warden, but you can also bring back this. It would replace Titan of Industry in the deck, which may be good and be bad. But Titan of Industry is a green card that you're never casting in that deck. You're only using it to put it in the graveyard or bringing it back with Invoke Calamity. But this makes your mana easier and lets you just cast this. It's a worse card than Titan of Industry, of course, but it means you can actually hard cast this out of your hand. So maybe it replaces that in the Boros aggro deck. I mean the Boros combo Reanimator deck. But I think it has potential, more potential than meets the eye, being a 6 mana 4/5.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like you have all the ideas for this.
I have some ideas.
That's great. I just see a 6 mana 4/5 that does 4 damage when it comes in, and then sometimes it has fire breathing. It just seems pretty expensive, but you're looking to cheat it out, and that's what you would do with something like this, because it's not good on rate.
Right, it's not Glorybringer for sure, but it's 1 mana more than Glorybringer. It doesn't have haste, but it deals 4 damage to any target. Yeah, it's not Glorybringer. Okay, we understand. Glorybringer is a just really good card, especially in a standard format. But I think this might be as close to Glorybringer as you can get. The fact that it deals 4 damage and is a big flyer, and it also pumps itself. Imagine how much mana you're going to have like randomly throughout the game, and you're gonna have this, and your opponent like is forced to deal with this with Infernal Grasp or whatever, unless you're just gonna take 9 to the face.
Yeah, like cheated in, great. Not cheated in, not so great.
Right.
I think that's kind of like the thing.
Right. Did you say anything about this already, Airball? Or you're just like done with this card?
No, I'm with Michael on it.
Boring.
I think this is like a limited bomb. Cheated into play, great, obviously, but that's true of most things. I think there are probably better targets. I'm not excited about this card.
You can use the 4 mana werewolf to pay 1 and a green to put this into play from your hand for 2 mana, which is like
Great.
pretty cool. You can also do that with like 12 Wars Hunt Master and stuff too, but you know, whatever. Anyway, you know what? I'm also going to be playing this in my. Oh no, is this a Jank Fest? I'm
Yes.
also playing this in my Vivian on the Hunt Birthing Pod deck to go from the 5 mana Workshop War Chief, put it to the graveyard, make a 4/4 with Workshop War Chief into Tyrant of Kerr Ridges, deal 4 damage to my opponent's thing. I will be doing that. Anyway, moving on to the next one is a really good green 1-drop. Teething Wormlet. It's a 1 green mana for a 1/1 worm. Teething Wormlet has Death Touch as long as you control 3 or more artifacts. Whether or not it's going to happen is probably Magical Christmas Land, but there it is. The thing that's interesting is, whenever an artifact enters the battlefield under your control, you gain 1 life. If this is the first time this ability has resolved this turn, put a 1/1 counter on Teething Wormlet. So, in an artifact synergy set, playing this as a 1/1, there's a lot of cards that make artifacts. There's the 3 mana 3/3 Rogue that has Vigilance and Trample that makes a treasure token. You might also play that. There's a lot of things that just incidentally make Power Stone tokens that you might play in a green deck. And this card is going to be a 2/2 and a 3/3 and a 4/4 and a 5/5 over the course of the game. And that kind of reminds me of the Pelt Collector, right? What do you think of this card?
I'll let the other player who plays with creatures talk first.
Yeah, you don't play with creatures, Airball. Let's let Michael talk about this.
I mean, I seldom ever play green creatures unless it's like Tarmogoyf, but you know. Let's see. I don't. Is
this not interesting to you guys?
No, it's
This
not.
card, this is Pelt Collector.
No, it's because Pelt Collector, you're doing it in a creature deck, and your Pelt Collector's a creature. You're bringing in more creatures,
Right.
Teething Wormlet. It's like, okay, well, I'm playing green green creatures, but then I also need to play artifacts.
Well, you just play the card I talked about, and you play Gallagrators, and that makes treasures, which are artifacts. Like, you're growing this every turn. Like, this is like a 1 mana 5/5. And you also incidentally gain life, and you also has Death Touch sometimes.
Let's pump the brakes. It's not a 1 mana 5/5.
It's a 1 mana 5/5.
Like, it's not a 1 mana 5/5.
It will be in my deck.
Okay.
You don't
Sure.
think this is gonna be a 1 mana 5/5? You don't think so?
No.
You don't think you put this?
It only triggers once per turn.
Well, yeah.
So it's going to have to live 5 turns, and it won't.
Well, I mean, if your 1-drop is garnering removal because it becomes a 3/3, then that's a good thing.
Yeah, sure. It's good, but like it's not Pelt Collector good. It's like Pelt Collector was great because it rewarded you for doing things that you were already trying to do anyway. Just put big, dumb, idiot creatures in play and get the payoff. Most of the artifacts in the green decks are incidental to what you're trying to do. They're not the actual game plan itself. I think that makes this worse than Pelt Collector. It's still good. It's probably the best 1-drop green creature we've seen in the last couple sets, but I'm not super excited about it.
Yeah, it's better than like Ascendant Pack Leader, right?
Yes. I think it is probably better than Ascendant Pack Leader. Probably.
Yeah, and like there's a lot of green cards that you would probably already play in your like mono green deck that already make artifacts, like a lot of them. But anyways, I think I like Teething Wormlet. It's not as interesting, I guess, to you guys than it is for me, but I'll be playing with this card, and it's a really cute art if you're watching this from YouTube. There's like a really cute bird next to it and everything. Like, it makes me want to play it even more. All right, let's go over to the next card. Soul Partition. It's 1 and white for an instant. Exile target non-land permanent. Full stop. Period. But wait, it has another sentence. For as long as that card remains exiled, its owner may play it. A spell cast by an opponent this way costs 2 more to cast. So it's like a delayed elite spellbinder. Like instead of using elite spellbinder on a card in your opponent's hand, you use it when your opponent has already cast it. So in a way, it's a little bit better in a way because your opponent already spent mana on it and they gotta spend mana on it again. So it's kind of like Wizards is trying out the whole like, what's that sweeper in Alchemy?
Yeah, exactly. Divine Purge.
Yeah, it's like Wizards is like trying out Divine Purge to like see if they can put a card like that in constructed standard. I don't know. What do you think about this, Airball? I'll go to you first since you play cards like this.
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking about this in the context of Divine Purge. It's a targeted Divine Purge. It hits one permanent, not the entire board. It is the problem with Divine Purge is that it is very often unplayable because it's serious card disadvantage. Divine Purge does wipe the board. It does buy you time, but the opponent gets to replay all of those cards, and sometimes they get value off of replaying them. So you need to close the game yourself before they get to take advantage of that. Soul Partition is kind of just that in the extreme. It's kind of like Fateful Absence that hits anything, but the opponent doesn't actually have to crack the clue. I think that this is probably not great removal. But it might be the best of the 2-drop slot that White has in Standard right now.
I mean, do you think this card is better than Fateful Absence?
I don't know. Oh, you're talking. Okay.
Do I think it's better than Fateful Absence? It hits anything.
Yeah, it does hit
instead of
anything.
just a creature or planeswalker. And the clue from Fateful Absence is basically paying 2 more to cast it. But you can split that across multiple turns, I guess. I think this card is probably a little better than Fateful Absence.
I mean, if you're saying that this card's better than Fateful Absence, that means this card's damn good. Because Fateful Absence is like the go-to 2-mana instant speed removal. Like even in Pioneer, like Fateful Absence is played because blue-white control has a hard time dealing with planeswalkers already.
Yeah.
So like, do you play this in even as far back of a format as Pioneer? Is it that good?
So the problem is Fateful Absence. This is a Fateful Absence where the clue is guaranteed to get you the card that was so bad that you had to remove it in the first place.
Exactly. Like it's a Fateful Absence, but Fateful Absence doesn't, like if you Fateful Absence to Chandra Torture Defiance and they crack the clue, they're not guaranteed to draw another Chandra Torture Defiance. They're drawing like whatever other card, right?
Exactly.
This card, they're just drawing exactly that card, but 2 more mana.
Right. So this is more flexible, but the downside is worse. And I think it'll depend a lot on whether there are non-creature, non-planeswalkers that need to be removed urgently.
Here's a wrinkle. What if you use this, like, what if you, like, use your Leyline Binding on, like, a big token or something, and then you, like, soul partition your own Leyline Binding to cast it again? Like, what if you, like, use this on your own stuff?
You could. You could do that. Those are like niche things that you that happen in a game. You're not looking to do that. It's like that's a skill-based thing, right? It's not going to happen every game. It's something you should look out for. It's wonderful that you pointed that out. I think we're kind of comparing in a weird way apples to oranges of like the Fateful Absence and Soul Partition. I think Soul Partition and Fateful Absence are almost like, as far as how good they both are, they're almost probably on the same level. They're just different tools in my mind. Like, except Soul Partition might eke out just a little bit better, because if you think about the game from a tempo perspective, super great on tempo, because then you're just like, all right, I could delay the game more. They're using this mana. Maybe I'll draw into a better removal spell, or I'll draw into a counter spell to deal with this, and you're taxing their mana, which is pretty good. Where a clue is like, you remove the thing, they have to spend 2 mana to get a card that may or may not be good or exactly what they need. Where Soul Partition, you know what's underneath. Like, it's not an unknown too. It's something you have to also piece together. So I don't know. I think it's kind of an apple to oranges type of thing. I think it's good. I think it's good removal.
Yeah, I think so. I'm not sure whether or not it's better than Fateful Absence, but if any card gets close to Fateful Absence, it's pretty good. Like, Fateful Absence is played a lot. Anyway, let's go over to another huge blue card. We're not done with huge blue cards, guys.
No,
this is a 7 mana, 4 and triple blue, Hurkyl's Final Meditation. It's an instant, it's 7 mana. As long as it's not your turn, this spell costs 3 more to cast. So on your opponent, this is just like fancy text for on your opponent's turn. It costs 10.
Yep.
Return all non-land permanents to their owner's hands. End the turn. Excuse me? Now I really found something to go Titania's Command into. I mean, I'll go to Airball. Like, what do you think of this? Like, from a controls perspective. I mean, you bounce your own stuff too.
Yeah, it's super expensive. It punishes you pretty heavily for playing to the board. It does end the turn, which means that if you hold up 7 mana, say go, and the opponent cycles a shark or casts a lobster, then you do get to counter that. I think this is much too expensive to do anything unless you can cast it for free. And I don't see a great way to do that.
I see a great way to do that. The Temporal Anchor, baby. We're
Right, yeah,
casting it with Temporal Anchor, and then we're bouncing our own
7.
Temporal Anchor back to our own hands.
Oh, it's a masterpiece. I love it.
Well done.
What's not to love? I looked at this card and I'm like, that's a commander card.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's you're having a real fun time with Hurkyl's Final Meditation at your commander table. I genuinely, actually, hopefully you have all the fun with this card, honestly. But constructed, 60 card constructed, not so much.
Yeah, this card is just a tad too expensive, but I do get some Cyclonic Rift vibes from this, even though it does return to all your board as well. Anyways, let's go to the next one. I'm pretty sure this is a reprint. Painful Quandary. 5 mana black enchantment, 3 and double black. Whenever an opponent casts a spell, that player loses 5 life unless they discard a card. This is like Torment of Hailfire vibes. Like, what? Like, is this just like you play blue-black control and like this is your win condition and just like hope they can't deal with it? I mean, I guess when they go to deal with it, they have to discard a card or pay 5. But that means they're just discarding a card, which means every card they play, they're discarding a card. But they're going to pay 5 all the way up until they have 5 life left. And then they're just going to start discarding cards. So like this might actually play out in practice better than it would play out in theory. I don't know. What do you think, Airball?
I don't think blue is like I don't think blue is like the right place for this per se. I think this is really good in the existing black base, like black mid-range mirrors that we saw a lot of in standard, because a lot of the black base decks just simply cannot answer a 5 mana enchantment easily.
I mean, Invoke Despair, but yeah.
Right, yeah, exactly. And the opponent has to dome themselves for 5 or discard a card when they do that, and it's a very specific answer that they need. I still don't think it's great. I think that a lot of the meta has migrated to Esper or Grixis or cards, decks that can run Disdainful Stroke, decks that can run Negate, Make Disappear. And it's going to be hard to resolve a 5 mana sorcery, and when you do, you'd probably rather it just be Invoke Despair. But it's cool to have options.
Yeah, I feel like you'd play this card in like a deck where you just solely rely on this card. Like, I want my opponent to be miserable card. Or maybe you play it in like discard.deck, like a mono black discard with like Pilfer and like a bunch of cards that say discard 2. And then you discard your opponent's hand and make every single card your opponent casts have to pay 5 life. And then that means they only get 4 spells in the whole game right after you get rid of their hand. So like that's like a really fun thing to do. But like, is it good? Not sure.
Yeah. No, I don't think so.
It's a cool thing to think about, though. All right, moving on to the next card is a 4 mana Visions of Phyrexia. 2 and double red for a 4 mana enchantment. At the beginning of your upkeep, exile the top card of your library. You may play that card this turn. It's another red enchantment. That's like the 3rd red enchantment we've read. At the beginning of your end step, if you didn't play a card from exile this turn, create a tapped Power Stone token. That's interesting. This is kind of like Frenzy-esque, but you can't just go off with it. Beginning of your upkeep, exile top card of your library. That kind of reminds me of like the Praetor. It does something similar to that. And the Praetor is also a creature. Making the tapped Power Stone tokens is interesting. It makes me feel like you don't want this in mono red. Like you would just want this in some other deck that wants to utilize cards from exile. Maybe there's like a commander that likes to cast cards from exile. I know there is for a fact. Like, isn't that Prosper card want you to cast cards from exile? Making the Power Stone tokens might be interesting. I don't know. What do you see a home for this card? Either one of you?
Maybe in like a is it control deck if that exists. Like that's the only thing I can think of because it's basically like a guaranteed land drop, quote unquote.
Maybe like a is it Tezzeret style deck or something, like an artifact deck that wants to utilize the Power Stone tokens.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. Like, yeah, you have some powerful is it like artifact control or artifact tempo deck that like just wants to make sure it can always get its mana after turn 4 and just like go big on something.
And I
I'm not
guess you
sure,
can get
but-
a lot of card advantage if you go Visions of Phyrexia, exile the top card of your library. You can play it. It also lets you play lands, and then you can also play the Temporal Anchor that lets you scry to the bottom and get more cards. So like you're drawing like 4 cards a turn if you have Visions of Phyrexia and Temporal Anchor in play. I don't know. It seems like there's like a theme of exiling cards and playing them in this set.
Actually, this card could actually be a lot stronger than we're even just giving it face value. Because if you think about it, like if you can always play a spell every turn, which is likely, especially in a deck given this type of like is it, and then you also make sure you always get a land every turn or 2 lands essentially, that like is a really strong effect. So it could. I think the ceiling of this can be actually pretty high, depending if you can get to that 4 mana and then keep it around. So I'm actually interested to see where this goes, to be honest.
I don't know how you see this, Harwell.
I think it's really tough to evaluate, but the first thing I thought of was Fires of Invention. I think this is really cool to make sure that you have the gas that keeps going, because the worst part of having a Fires deck is if you just don't have anything to play off of the Fires. And B, the Fires decks tend to be very, very good at using excess mana, right? They have Kenrith, they have a companion like Karuga or Yorion or something. They have
Cavalier,
utility
maybe?
lands that are mana sinks. Cavaliers would be pretty good. Yeah, I think that, and Power Stones can be used to fund all of those things. So I kind of like it there. I don't know if it's better than anything that's being used in the existing Fires decks is the thing.
Like
But-
like you can also sack this to Enigmatic Incarnation if you like really need to.
Yeah, you're pretty sad to turn this into 1 card when you're hoping it turns into multiple cards over the course of the game. But yeah, you could do that.
I mean, yeah, I feel like that could be good because you always want to do something on turn 4 after you cast Fires of Invention. But this doesn't impact the board right away. It's just a card advantage card, and usually that deck is, especially Enigmatic, has a lot of card advantage through other means that doesn't really need a card like this. Especially with Kenrith to keep drawing your cards, bringing cards back out of the graveyard. I don't know. I don't think you would like need this effect. I'm not sure. There's like a mono red Fires of Invention deck going around in Pioneer very briefly that I've seen recently, and maybe this would go in that. I'm not sure. But let's move on to the next one. The next one is a reprint, very powerful card, Fauna Shaman. 1 and a green for a creature elf shaman, 2/2. If you haven't read this card before, I'll read it to you. 1, you can pay a green and tap it and discard a creature card. Search your library for any creature card, reveal it, put it in your hand, and shuffle. So this is a what is that commander card that's like super expensive? It's like a 2 mana enchantment that does the same thing. But I forgot what the card's called. Survival of the Fittest, I think it's called. Yeah, that's what it's called. It's like a Survival of the Fittest on a creature. It's a 2 mana 2/2. The only time I've ever seen this card being played in Constructed was in like Historic before the Alchemy cards came in, and there was like a Winota deck they used to search Winota before that got banned. So I could see this being in a sort of creature combo deck that you just need a certain creature, but you're already playing a lot of creatures anyway. How do you think Fauna Shaman goes with this overall artifacts set? I don't really know where they're going with Fauna Shaman in this format, but maybe there's a creature or two that you even any ideas of how you utilize Fauna Shaman in this format?
Standard, no, but maybe this is something that could be good in like Pioneer with the Abzan Greasefang decks, because you'd always, make sure you always hit Greasefang.
That is true.
Like
it's
this
not
is like-
Pioneer, right?
No,
Yeah, I was
I
just
don't.
looking it up. It's not legal in Pioneer yet.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
so it might be that, but you also have to make sure it survives, because it's like you have to do this on turn 3, and then have Greasefang for turn 4. But that still might be a good enough thing. I'm not quite sure.
Yeah, it's still like
but-
searches Greasefang.
Right. Yeah. And you like discard like what, the 1 mana freaking
Whatever. Rafine's
yeah.
Informant or whatever.
Yeah, something. But like, yeah, you guarantee you have copies of Greasefang essentially if this thing survives.
My thing about this card, I think, in the application that it would be would be in the like a Naya reanimator deck, where you would like discard a random creature, search for your reanimator piece, and then you discard a reanimator piece that you need in the graveyard anyway on the next turn to search another creature that you need.
We're talking dragons, aren't we?
Are we talking freaking Tyrant of Kerr Ridges again?
Yeah, are we talking mopey six drop dragon?
I mean, you
Or
get to
5
search
flyer.
it though. You get to search it, put it in the graveyard, and you can search another card
And you
by
get to be
discarding it.
disappointed when you find it.
I wouldn't be disappointed if I found it. I'd play that card on my graveyard super quick. Deals 4 damage, has fire breathing. That's like all you ever want to have in a card. Okay, we're not talking about Tyrant of Kerr Ridges right now. We're talking about Fauna Shaman. I think like the whole discard synergy, I think that does work really well in the Abzan Greasefang deck. Just because you can't really do that until turn 4, maybe it makes you play Raffine's Informant anyway over Fauna Shaman, and maybe Fauna Shaman's not good enough. But what do you think, Airball?
Yeah, I think this is probably pretty clearly just to make it available in Pioneer. That's the point of the reprint. I don't know that it's going to make a big difference in Standard, and I don't know that it'll be useful in Pioneer right away. But it's just about getting tools into the format.
Yeah, for sure. All right, moving on to the next one. It's a white mana. 2 and a white. Takazia's Welcome. It's an enchantment. Whenever one or more creatures with mana value 3 or less enter the battlefield under your control, draw a card. This ability triggers only once each turn. So this is like a welcoming vampire, but better, but also doesn't come with a 2/3 flying body. I like this because it doesn't necessarily matter what power the card has. It matters the mana value. Sometimes when you have a bunch of wedding festivities on the board and you have like a big anthem, and you have a welcoming vampire in play, you start not drawing cards off of it because your creatures are too big. So like this can do that, but it's also not a 2/3. So I mean, Airball, I'll start with you. How do you evaluate this card in like a 3 mana or less creature deck to get card advantage?
I think it's. I mean, there's already a pretty damn good green-white enchantments deck in Standard. I think this is just another piece that'll make it even better. Like, imagine playing some number of Jukai Naturalists with this. They
Yeah.
each play super well off of each other. You have like the Hallowed Haunting as the end piece of that deck. It was already quite good. This just makes it better, I think.
Yeah, for sure. What do you think, Michael?
Yeah, I think this is interesting. I know I keep saying sideboard card stuff, but like this is also probably a sideboard card for like control stuff. So it's like you can make sure you keep having gas and drawing cards after you play one creature after the other. Because it's like, well, it's like cantrip. It like turns your creatures into like cantrips but you're still getting a body. So it's just like I put a body, I grab a card. I put a body, I get a card. And so like, I think it's something that could be pretty decent.
Yeah, I can see definitely going like Jukai Naturalist on turn 2, turn 3 play an untapped land, play Takazia's Welcome for 2 mana because it's discounted, and then playing another 1-drop creature after that, like the 1-drop Spirit that every time you cast an enchantment, get to put a +1/+1 counter on a creature. That lets you draw a card, and the next turn you get more draws. So I feel like this card can get out of hand pretty quickly, even though it only triggers once per turn, but you do keep your gas flowing. So really good card for that deck. I don't know about any other applications, maybe like a mono white card, but why wouldn't mono white just play Wedding Announcement instead of this card? Maybe maybe that's a point of contention. Maybe you play both. Maybe you play 4 Wedding Announcement and 1 Takazia's Welcome or something. But we shall see. Moving on to the next one, Hurkyl Master Wizard. With a name like Master Wizard, you would assume it's pretty good, right? I don't know, I haven't read it yet. 1 in double blue for a 2/4 legendary creature, Human Wizard Advisor. At the beginning of your end step, if you've cast a non-creature spell this turn, reveal the top 5 cards of your library. For each card type among non-creature spells you've cast this turn, you may put a card of that type from among the revealed cards into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. So, you play this card on turn 3, you untap with it, hopefully, or you like play a Tormod's Crypt and look at the top 7 and try to get an artifact, which is still pretty good, or like a 0 mana artifact, something like that. Anyway, you can untap with this, play your land or whatever, and then you can play an artifact and an enchantment, and like maybe something else, and then look at the top 7 and get one of each of them. It's a little bit dicey as far as like, it's pretty random. But I'll go to you, Airball, as the blue player. I mean, how do you analyze this card?
I mean, I think we kind of tried in our last episode, right? We had this teaser text from Morrow, and I think where I came down was by the time you're casting a bunch of spells all on one turn, you're probably already winning the game. So this does feel kind of win-more-y to me, and you do need to play a variety of creature or card types as well, which is not super easy to do because most of those are expensive. Like planeswalkers are usually going to be pretty expensive and hard to play multiples of in a turn. The same is true for any creatures that you want to be playing alongside a mid-rangey deck. Um, I don't know that this is going to be a great source of card advantage. I I find this card very difficult to evaluate.
Yeah, like I think if this said like 3 mana 2/4, like draw a card, but it was guaranteed, it would just be a better card.
I think there's a way to make it guaranteed. But I think what you do is honestly, it's definitely for a deck that has instant sorceries and creatures. It's a tempo deck. Belongs in a tempo deck, like straight up. Like,
Okay, well, I have to interrupt you because it says non-creature spells, so it doesn't work with creatures.
I know it says that, but you have to play a creature. Therefore, you're playing Hurkle.
Oh,
Therefore,
fair.
It's a tempo deck. You want to still play creatures to hurt your opponents. You're not playing this.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. It's like, I feel like the best home for it is the majority of your deck is a mixture of instant sorceries and creatures for this to really like turn on and do things. Because then you're just your cards are flowing and you're impacting the board and you're doing damage and you're being proactive while acquiring these cards in hand. I don't know if it does really great stuff in a mixture of planeswalkers, because that's another type that's going to be in there that for you to whiff or not get. And then you have like artifacts and then like all these other freaking card types, and it's just like, well, are you really doing anything? Or are you going to want to make sure that you draw those things? Like you said, this would only be good if it actually drew you the things. So like you have to condense down your types, right?
Right. You have to have like non-creature spells of different types in your hand. Like if you play a cheap artifact and a cheap instant and a cheap sorcery, and then like you have to also have those types on the top 5 cards of your deck. I feel like that's like a lot to have, right?
Yeah. So that's why I'm just like instant sorcery, creature, and land.
Now,
That's the only things you want.
I guess you could just play like an artifacts deck, right? Like, could you imagine putting this into blue-white artifacts in Historic or something? Because if your deck is a critical mass of like 30 artifacts in it, and you're always playing one of them every single turn, you're pretty likely to draw another one off of the top 5 of your library, right? So it's like almost
so
a
it's
better
like if your opponent doesn't deal with
ingeniousness.
this, it's just like draw an artifact every turn on your end step.
Yeah, I mean, if your opponent is tapped out and it's your turn 4, right? You play Hurkle and then you play like Esper Sentinel or something. And then, I guess it can't be Esper Sentinel. It would have to be like the Retrofitter Foundry or some other random artifact. And you'd get another one probably for free.
Like in that sense, it's good. And then your opponent like has to remove it, or else you're just gonna like play another artifact and then like on your end step get another artifact. So like in that way, it can draw multiple cards. So you might have to just niche your deck down into not trying to do like full greed with this and cast everything of different types. Maybe it's just like you play Hurkle and you play like an enchantment. Maybe it's an aura or whatever, and then you like look at the top cards of your deck to try to find another aura. Maybe it goes in like blue-white auras too, like as a one of or something, because it's legendary. That you cast an aura and you look at the top 5 for another aura, or something like that. But in that case, I can see it's a lot better than trying to go for the full 9 yards on this card. All right, moving on to the next one. Oh my goodness, I just saw the name of this. I am shaking. It's Diabolic Intent as a reprint into Standard and Pioneer. 1 and a black for a sorcery. As an additional cost to cast this spell, sacrifice a creature. Search your library for a card. Put it into your hand and then shuffle. Just period. No other text. Just search a card. I mean, yeah. Is this played in Standard? Like it has to. It's freaking Diabolic Intent. It's like basically Demonic Tutor.
Yeah, this is really good.
I would assume so. And it feels like we're getting closer and closer with all these cards to getting close to a decent Dimir control deck. And like, just for any of the listeners or viewers out there, if there's ever a Dimir control tech that goes, just play the deck. Have a good experience with Dimir, because there's never Dimir decks that are actually great in Standard if you're playing Standard or even Pioneer. Like there was for like a week or two, but like if there's any good time that you want to try something new and different, if Dimir goes, play the Dimir deck. Give yourself an experience for one time in your life.
I mean, if people listen to you and actually play Dimir, that means we're gonna have to play a lot of Dimir matches. Oh God, that was a bad joke. Anyway, what do you what do you think, Airball, of like an implication for standard? Like, you're just playing this in like a Rakdos sacrifice deck with a bunch of little things? I mean, obviously you're playing it in like combo decks and in other formats like Pioneer, but what are you doing in the constructed formats of this?
Well, Pioneer. This is my first thought was this in Pioneer, and what scared the hell out of me was turn 1 Stitcher Supplier,
Oh
turn
God,
2
yeah.
Diabolic Intent. You've milled 6 off of the Stitcher Supplier. You already see what those cards are in the bin before you fetch.
Oh no, you search Greasefang.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
So turn 1 Stitcher Supplier,
Yeah.
turn 2 Diabolic Intent, sacrifice Stitcher Supplier, mill any ship at all in 6 cards. Search Greasefang, play a land, cast Greasefang, GG's.
Yeah, the consistency there would be extreme. Now you do give up your board for it. Like a lot of the Greasefang consistency right now comes from the 2-drops that like connive it into the graveyard and pressure the opponent into doing something rather than holding up counter magic. But this would be an incredibly consistent way to Greasefang, especially on the play.
Like the problem with Greasefang is like sometimes they just never get to it. I play against Greasefang sometimes, and like I get a free win because one out of the 3 games that we potentially play, they just can never get to Greasefang with a bunch of ships, or they can never get to ships with like 3 Greasefangs in hand. So it's like,
yeah,
it's just like they have a hard time finding both sometimes, and Diabolic Intent just does that. It just gets you there.
Yeah. Depending on how deck, because people can like also go to the workshop with Greasefang and maybe change the deck just because of this thing existing,
right?
And maybe like they fashion something that's more consistent or something like odd, because this can change like the deck's makeup other than the key pieces of hit your opponent with some busted vehicle. So I'm curious to see if we can even possibly get like a Greasefang banning because it becomes too consistent. Don't know.
I don't know.
Don't go to the banning message boards already.
You're gonna have to put your tinfoil hat on for that one.
Yeah, tinfoil hat's on. For sure.
I don't know. Outside of Greasefang, like, can you think of a standard deck or maybe like a Pioneer deck that would want this? Maybe like a combo deck that maybe isn't already playing black that plays this, or maybe a combo deck that's already playing black for this. Maybe there's like a way to fit Diabolic Intent into like your, I don't know, your Lotus Field deck or something. It's gonna be hard to sacrifice a creature in that deck, but who knows? I don't think this goes in every black deck. Like Rakdos midrange probably won't play this because all the creatures are too valuable to sacrifice. But what do you think?
I'm thinking like,
what's up?
I was just going to say, like, Indomitable Creativity is a good answer to your question, right? Like, if you can just get a black splash in there, you already have a shitload of token creatures to sacrifice because you're already planning on doing it for creativity. Now you fetch creativity from your deck.
Well, creativity, wouldn't you just play like Wishclaw Talisman instead of this at that point?
You could do that too. Yeah, that's true.
And like they could already play that and they aren't.
Yeah, that's a good point.
But Diabolic Intent is a very, very powerful card. It's Demonic Tutor if your deck can afford to sacrifice a creature. So we'll see how good this ends up being. I could also see this being really good in like Jund Sacrifice or Rakdos Sacrifice that just has a random Bolas Citadel in the deck chilling. That you just search that card and just go off at the top of your library because you can search for it now. You don't have to put like multiple copies of a 6-mana artifact in your deck. You can just search for it whenever you need if you have multiple copies of Diabolic Intent in your deck. You can also sacrifice a random Cauldron Familiar and search up Witch's Oven. Like, wow, that's just so good. I don't know. The implications of Jund Sacrifice and Rakdos Sacrifice is what really turns me on to this card, but this card is obviously broken anyway. We all know this card's broken. Let's go ahead and move on to Feldon Ronom Excavator. It's a 1 and a red for a 2/2 legendary creature human artificer. It has haste. 2 mana 2/2 haste for red. Feldon Ronom Excavator can't block. Whenever Feldon is dealt damage, exile that many cards from the top of your library. Choose one of them. Until the end of your next turn, you may play that card. So this gives me very good Robber of the Rich vibes. Even though it's not guaranteed like when a rogue attacks like Robber of the Rich is, but it also does, you don't need to have less cards in your hand than your opponent. It's 2 mana 2/2 haste, which red always wants. It can't block, which is interesting because if it could block, it would be too good, right? Whenever it's dealt damage and you just block with it and get card advantage. But it's really good against decks that only have red-based removal. Like maybe Izzet Phoenix and Pioneer. Maybe just like any Izzet deck, and their only removal is like Strangle and deal 3 damage to X thing, deal 2 damage to something. You'll always get a card out of this. So in that way, I think this might be better than Robber of the Rich. But how do you evaluate this card? I'll start with you, Michael.
Isn't there a Kamigawa card that's kind of similar? That's 1 mana though, and like when it dies, or 2 mana when it dies, you get to like exile the top 2 cards of your library and play one of them that turn or something like that.
Yeah, that's a 1-drop. It's played. It's like a 1 mana 1/1. It's played in the Rakdos Sacrifice deck.
Yeah, so I don't know, because that exists at 1 mana. I don't know if this 2 mana legendary is better than that. It's kind of better in the sense it's more aggressive, but that's the only upside I see compared to the 1 mana.
Right, you can go turn 1, Kumano faces Kakazan, and then turn 2, this as a 3/3 haste, which is really good. What do you think, Airball?
Yeah, I think this is better than the 1-drop because it's something that rewards you for having it get removed, and it's got enough pressure built into it that your opponent is going to have to remove it. Right now, there's a lot of black removal in Standard. It probably doesn't make the cut, but if we go back to like Voltage Surge being like the best removal spell in Standard, like it was for a while, then all of a sudden this is great. It's a 2-for-1 on most removal spells at that point.
Yep, and right now the most popular removal spells are Infernal Grasp and Cut Down, and those are both really good against Feldon. But I wouldn't be surprised if Mono Red just played this anyway. Like a 2-mana 2/2 haste is really good. I mean, is this better than like Phoenix Chick? Like probably, but we already have Monastery Swift Spear, so like you're already playing that over Phoenix Chick. So what are you playing this over? Is the question. Anyways, let's move over to the next card. It is Fade from History. It is probably the cutest card you'll ever see if you're watching this from YouTube. It's like 3 baby bears. 2 and a double green for a sorcery. Each player who controls an artifact or enchantment creates a 2/2 green bear creature token. Then destroy all artifacts and enchantments. Like, whoa. Destroying all artifacts and enchantments? That's like a pretty powerful effect. And also you get to just make some bears. I didn't even plan this, by the way. This is the second card that makes bears, and our jargon of the day was bear. I did not plan this. But
subconscious.
Sometimes you just have it, you know? Anyway, what do you think of Fade from History?
It sucks.
Sideboard card.
Yeah, at best.
Imagine getting this off against, like, white-green enchantments. You just win. Like, everything's an enchantment. Right?
Yeah.
every card, even their creatures. So this is just like Plague Wind against that deck. Also, in Commander, it wins the game also. Like, you just kill everybody's artifacts and enchantments, and that's devastating. So, if anything, this will be a $20 Commander card in like 2 months. Watch. This is going to be an expensive Commander card. Well, probably only Commander and very niche sideboard card.
Yeah.
All right. We have a couple more rares to go. We have some more rares to go over. We're almost done with the monocolored cards, so stick with us. Ashnod Flesh Mechanist. 1 mana, 1/1 legendary creature, human artificer with Death Touch. Whenever Ashnod Flesh Mechanist attacks, you may sacrifice another creature. If you do, create a tapped Power Stone token. We're trading creatures for Power Stones now? I don't know about that. All right. You can pay 5 mana, generic, and exile a creature card from your graveyard. Create a tapped 3/3 colorless zombie artifact creature token. So it like, the flavor of it is like you're killing your board to like turn them into mummified zombies. But you have to pay 5 mana to do that. And it's a 1 mana 1/1. It does have Death Touch. I mean, this whole time, if you're watching this from YouTube, Michael's just shaking his head. But this kind of reminds me of like the 1/1 Valentine card that like hardly anyone played, and it was like very niche. Like these 1 mana 1/1 legendary cards with text are a little bit interesting to play in Standard, right?
Yeah, I agree. I don't know what to do with this card. I really don't. I guess like a sacrifice
deck, but it also makes Power Stone tokens, but that Power Stone tokens fuel the 5 mana to exile the creature to make a 3/3, so it's like a 3/3 generating engine in 1-drop.
This is also counterintuitive to a deck you want to run this in, because like usually you want cards or creatures that can come back to the battlefield easily and at good rate, and you're sacrificing them initially, yeah, but then you have to exile some of these creatures to make a 3/3 colorless zombie artifact creature token. Like I think it's kind of like it's solving its own it's answering its own questions, which I'm like, that's not what you should be doing in your own deck.
It's also so slow. I guess if you're playing like a black deck that cares about Power Stones and also cares about sacrificing your creatures, all right, now it already sounds bad. I should stop talking, right?
Yeah, this is one of those cards that's like gonna see no play at all, and then Wizards is gonna bring it into Alchemy and nerf it from like and buff it from like costing 5 to costing 1,
And then it's gonna be
it'll
broken.
system play.
All right, that is it for the white, blue, black, red, and green monocolor cards. And this actually concludes this part of it. We're gonna do the multicolor cards, and trust me, there's a lot of multicolor cards that you really want to listen to, where there's a lot of artifacts to go over that you really want to listen to as well. And then there's some cool lands that we're going to go over that finishes a cycle from the last set. Thank you very much for everyone that was listening to this podcast, especially to those of you who made it this far. Let us know in the comments if you're watching this on YouTube, and let us know on Twitter at Nuts and Bolts Pod. Subscribe if you're watching from YouTube, and we will see you in the top 8.